Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto is summoned to DxD by Sirzechs to marry Rias and Sona? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A Pact of Crimson and Indigo. The air in the Lucifer family's private study was thick enough to be a physical weight. It smelled of old leather, expensive wine, and the cloying sweetness of desperation. Sirzechs Lucifer, the Crimson Satan, stood before a vast, floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the perpetually twilight sky of the underworld. The crimson clouds drifted lazily, ignorant of the storm brewing within the palace walls. His own crimson hair seemed to absorb the dim light, a stark slash of color against the deep purples and blacks of his formal attire. He wasn't smiling. For those who knew him well, the absence of his easy, charismatic grin was more terrifying than any display of rage. The Bale family has invoked the ancient accords for the third time this month, he said, his voice a low, dangerous murmur. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. He could feel the presence of his wife, Graphia Lucifuge, standing like a silver statue by the door. Their position is technically sound, my lord, Graphia responded. Her tone as crisp and cool as a winter morning. The engagement contract between Rias and Rias Sona was signed by your father. They argue that upholding it is a matter of tradition and honor. Tradition. Sirzechs scoffed, the word dripping with a venom he rarely displayed. He finally turned, and the full force of his frustration was visible in his turquoise eyes. They speak of tradition while their true aim is to bind the Grimoire and Phoenix houses, creating a political bloc powerful enough to challenge my authority. They use my sister as a bargaining chip, a prize to be won. Rias will not accept it. Graphia stated, a simple fact. Of course she won't. She is my sister, he said, a flicker of pride in his voice. She would rather go to war than be shackled to that arrogant fool. And if she does, our father will support her. The Citri clan will likely remain neutral, but the other pillar families, they will fracture. It will be a civil war, Graphia. A quiet one odd in council chambers and with backroom deals, but a war nonetheless. All while the remnants of the old Satan faction fester in the dark and the other pantheons watch us, waiting for a moment of weakness. He walked over to a grand mahogany desk, a relic from his father's time, and rested his hands upon it. The surface was covered in scrolls and reports, each one a thread in the suffocating web of his responsibilities. For a fleeting moment, he looked not like a great Satan, a being of immense power, but simply a tired man burdened by a crown he had never truly sought. I need a solution that is not a surrender, he mused. His fingers tracing the rim of a crystal glass. Something that honors the letter of the contract while utterly destroying its spirit. Something unexpected. A force of nature that cannot be accounted for in their political equations. Graphia remained silent, her silver hair catching the dim light. She was his queen, in politics as much as in a rating game. She knew when to offer counsel and when to simply listen. For months, Sirzechs continued, his gaze becoming distant. Ajuka has been analyzing the dimensional gap. He's found echoes, frequencies of worlds running parallel to our own. Most are barren, lifeless. But some vibrate with immense power. Power untethered to our systems of magic, divinity, or demonic energy. Graphia's composure finally cracked. A single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose. My lord, you cannot be considering a high-risk, untargeted dimensional summons. The last time that was attempted was during the Great War. It brought forth a beast that leveled 3 cities before it was finally sealed. The situation is different. Sirzechs countered, pushing away from the desk and beginning to pace. That was a blind casting, a desperate plea for a weapon. This will be a request, a negotiation. We will not be summoning a monster to unleash, but a champion to make an alliance with. Ajuka has isolated a world teeming with a unique energy signature. Something he calls chakra. It's a realm forged in conflict, a place where the power of a single individual can rival that of a god. The inhabitants are human, but not in the way we understand it. And you would pull one of these beings from their home to solve a domestic dispute. Graphia's voice was laced with a rare hint of disapproval. I would offer one of them an opportunity, Sirzechs corrected. An escape, perhaps. A new purpose. I will not force this. I will offer a pact. A contract that benefits us both. He stopped his pacing and looked directly at his wife. I will offer him an alliance, status, and the hands of two of the most powerful and influential heiresses in the underworld. Graphia's eyes widened slightly. You mean to involve the Sitri family in this as well? Sona Sitri is in the exact same predicament as Rias, Sirzechs explained. Her family is under immense pressure to marry her off to secure their own political standing. Lord Sitri is a pragmatist. But he loves his daughter. He despises the idea of forcing her into a loveless union as much as my father does. I have already spoken with him. He agrees. It is a desperate gambit. But the potential reward, it's too great to ignore. He gestured towards a heavy tome bound in black dragonhide that sat on a pedestal in the corner of the room. The ritual is prepared. Lord Grimoire, Lord Sitri, and a few select elders will be in attendance. They believe we are attempting a last-ditch divination. They do not know the true nature of the casting. This is a path from which there is no return, my lord. Graphia warned, her voice soft. Once this champion arrives, the political landscape will be irrevocably altered. That is precisely the point, Sirzechs said, a flicker of his old, confident smile finally returning to his face. Let the old guard choke on their traditions. It is time for a new player to enter the game. The ritual chamber was deep beneath the Grimoire estate, a place carved from the bones of the underworld itself. The air was cold and still, carrying the scent of ozone and ancient stone. A vast, intricate summoning circle dominated the floor, its complex network of runes and glyphs glowing with a soft, pulsating crimson light. Sirzechs stood at the northern point of the circle, flanked by Lord Grimoire, a man whose genial face was etched with worry, and Lord Sitri, whose expression was an unreadable mask of stoicism. A handful of elders, ancient devils whose faces were like dried leather, stood silently in the shadows, their presence a suffocating miasma of judgment. Among them was Lord Glacia Labelas, a staunch traditionalist who had been the most vocal proponent of the Phoenix Union. He watched the proceedings with a hawk's eye, his suspicion a palpable force. He believed this ritual to be a sham, a desperate attempt by Sirzechs to find a non-existent loophole. Are you certain of this, Sirzechs? Lord Grimoire whispered, his gaze fixed on the swirling energy at the center of the circle. The energies, they feel alien, unstable. All great change is preceded by instability, father-in-law, Sirzechs replied, his voice calm and reassuring. Though his heart hammered against his ribs, he had absolute faith in Ajuka's calculations, but the number of unknown variables was staggering. He raised his hands, and the crimson light of the circle intensified. He began the incantation, his voice resonating with the power of destruction. The ancient words, a language that predated the devil race itself, echoed through the chamber, causing the very stone to vibrate. The other lords joined in, their own demonic energies weaving into the spell, a tapestry of crimson, indigo, and gold. The energy in the circle began to swirl faster, forming a vortex of raw power. It was a maelstrom of light and shadow, and at its heart, a tear in reality began to form. It was in that moment that Lord Glacia Labelas felt it. For a fraction of a second, the ritual chamber vanished. The crimson light, the oppressive heat, the hum of demonic power, it was all gone. He was floating in an abyss, a place of absolute, soul-crushing silence. There were no stars, no light, no sound, no feeling. It was not darkness, for darkness is the absence of light. This was pure nothing, an unbeing that threatened to unravel his very existence, to erase the concept of him from all of time and space. The terror was so profound, so complete, that it bypassed fear and went straight to a primal instinct to cease existing. Then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone. He was back in the chamber, a cold sweat plastering his robes to his ancient frame. He gasped, clutching his chest, his heart seizing in a way it hadn't in millennia. No one else seemed to have noticed. Their attention was fixed on the summoning circle, where the tear in reality had stabilized into a shimmering portal. The vision was already fading, like a nightmare upon waking, but the chilling sensation of utter annihilation lingered. Peace. It was a concept Naruto Uzumaki had fought for, bled for, and nearly died for more times than he could count. And now, sitting atop the stone, head of his eternal rival and greatest friend, he had finally found it. The Valley of the End was no longer a monument to their conflict, but a testament to their reconciliation. The wind whistled a gentle tune as it swept through the canyon, a soft eulogy for an era of hatred that was finally over. Naruto sat cross-legged, his eyes closed, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't the boisterous, hyperactive ninja he had once been. The fourth great ninja war had forged him into something else. The fires of that conflict had burned away his naivete, leaving behind a core of tempered steel. He was calm now, centered. The immense power that churned within him, the chakra of the nine-tailed beasts, the six paths sage mode, was not a raging inferno, but a placid ocean, vast and deep and utterly under his control. "You've been quiet for a while, Kit," a deep, rumbling voice echoed in his mind. It was Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, his tone devoid of its old malice, replaced by a gruff, familiar companionship. "Just thinking," Naruto replied, his mental voice calm. "About how much it took to get here. About everyone who didn't. Peace is never cheap," Kurama rumbled. "But you earned it. Now, stop moping and enjoy it." Naruto allowed a small smile to grace his lips. He was about to reply when a strange sensation washed over him. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an attack. It was a pull. A gentle but irresistible summons. Like a cosmic tide drawing him out to sea. His eyes snapped open. His senses, honed by years of war and heightened by sage mode, stretched out, trying to identify the source. It wasn't from anywhere in the elemental nations. It felt like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Naruto, what is this?" Kurama's voice held a note of genuine confusion, a rare occurrence. "This isn't ninjutsu. It's not genjutsu either. It feels like the universe itself is calling your name." Naruto stood up, his orange and black jacket fluttering in the wind. The pull intensified. He could fight it. He knew he could. He could anchor himself with Kurama's chakra, root himself to the very bedrock of the continent. But he didn't. Instead, a spark of the old curiosity, the same curiosity that had led him to peek at forbidden scrolls and challenge impossible foes, ignited within him. "Where's the fun in staying put?" he thought, a familiar grin spreading across his face for the first time in what felt like an age. He relaxed his body, released his anchor, and let the tide take him. The world around him dissolved not into a violent vortex, but into a soft, shimmering haze. The sound of the wind was replaced by a gentle hum. For a moment, he felt like he was floating in a warm ocean, unburdened and weightless. Then, his feet found solid ground. The humming stopped. The haze solidified. He was standing in a circle of glowing red lines, the air thick with an energy that was completely foreign to him. It was heavy, potent, and tinged with something that felt vaguely negative, but it wasn't malicious. It just was. Before him stood a group of individuals who were most certainly not from Konoha. One had crimson hair that matched the glowing circle and eyes the color of a summer sky. His power felt immense, a calm sea hiding unfathomable depths. Beside him stood two older men, one who looked like a kind, if worried, version of the first, and another with a stern, tactical expression. Surrounding them were others, old and cloaked in shadows. But it was not the men who held his attention. Standing slightly behind them, almost protectively, were two young women. One had hair the color of blood, a perfect match for the man who was clearly the leader. Her figure was stunning, but it was her eyes, a vibrant blue-green, that captivated him. They blazed with defiance, pride, and a hint of desperation. She looked like a cornered lioness, ready to fight to the death. The other was her opposite in almost every way. She had short, black hair and a slender, more athletic build. She wore glasses, and behind them, her violet eyes were sharp, analytical, and cold. She was assessing him, not as a person, but as a problem, a variable in an equation she was trying to solve. Her posture was rigid, her hands clasped behind her back, a perfect picture of controlled, icy fury. Naruto remained silent, his hands tucked into his pockets, his posture relaxed. He let them stare. He let them feel the sheer placidness of his presence, the way the chaotic energy of the summoning circle settled around him, becalmed by the ocean of power that resided within his soul. He offered a simple, disarming smile. "So," he began, his voice calm and clear, breaking the stunned silence. Is someone going to tell me where I am, or did you just pull me from a perfectly good afternoon for the view? The sound of his voice, so utterly normal and devoid of fear or aggression, seemed to snap the devils out of their stupor. Sirzechs was the first to recover, his political instincts taking over. He had expected a beast, a warlord, a monster. He had prepared for threats, for demands, for rage. He had not prepared for calm, charismatic confidence. "Greetings," Sirzechs said, his own charming smile returning, though it felt slightly strained. "My name is Sirzechs Lucifer, and I must apologize for the unorthodox method of our invitation. We are in the underworld, the realm of devils." Naruto's eyebrow arched slightly. "Devils, huh? You guys are a lot better dressed than the ones in the stories." He looked around the chamber, his gaze lingering on the ancient stone and oppressive atmosphere. "Nice place. A little dark. Could use a few more windows." Lord Grimoire blinked, taken aback by the casual response. Lord Sitri's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes narrowed slightly, intensifying his analysis. "You are taking this remarkably well," Sirzechs noted, a genuine smile now gracing his lips. This was better than he could have hoped for. "May we have the honor of your name?" "Naruto Uzumaki." The name meant nothing to them, yet he said it with an easy finality, as if it should. "Naruto Uzumaki," Sirzechs repeated, testing the sound of it. "We have summoned you here because we are in need of your assistance. We wish to propose an alliance." He gestured for the two young women to step forward. The crimson-haired one did so with a reluctant, stiff grace. The black-haired one moved with crisp, efficient steps. "This is my younger sister, Rias Grimoire," Sirzechs said, indicating the redhead. "And this is Sona Sitri, the heiress to the house of Sitri." Rias gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes still blazing with suspicion. Sona offered a more formal, though equally cold, nod of her head. Naruto's gaze softened as he looked at them. He saw past the pride and the icy control. He saw two young women trapped in a cage not of their own making. It was a look he had seen 1,000 times in the eyes of his friends, his comrades, during the war. "A pleasure," he said, his smile becoming genuine. "Now, what kind of trouble are you two in that your big brother had to pull a stranger from another dimension to solve it?" He addressed the question to Rias and Sona directly, ignoring the powerful lords for a moment. The directness of the question surprised them both. Rias's jaw tightened. "It is a political matter," she said, her voice sharp. "It does not concern you." "It seems to," Naruto countered gently, "considering I'm standing in this magic circle. I get the feeling you didn't just summon me here for a chat. So, let's skip the political games and get to the point. What do you want from me?" Sirzechs stepped forward again, reclaiming control of the conversation. "Very well, Naruto Uzumaki. Straight to the point. My sister and Lady Sitri are bound by engagement contracts they did not agree to. These contracts were made for political gain by forces within our government that wish to see them used as pawns." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We cannot break these contracts through conventional means without triggering a civil war that would tear our world apart. However, there is a loophole. An older law, one that supersedes any marriage contract." Quote, "And what law is that?" Naruto asked, his curiosity piqued. "The law of a sacred union blessed by a being of immense, otherworldly power," Sirzechs stated, his turquoise eyes locking onto Naruto's. "A being such as yourself. We are proposing a new contract. A marriage contract, between you, Rias Grimoire, and Sona Sitri." Silence. The ancient elders in the shadows stirred, whispering amongst themselves. Lord Grimoire looked at the floor, unable to meet Naruto's gaze. Lord Sitri simply watched, his face a perfect slate. Rias looked horrified, her face paling slightly. This was worse than she had imagined. They weren't just using a stranger to save her, they were shackling her to him. Sona's glasses glinted as she pushed them up the bridge of her nose, her mind racing, calculating the 1,000 different ways this could go disastrously wrong. Naruto's smile finally faded. He looked from Sirzechs to the two girls, his expression unreadable. He remained silent for a long, uncomfortable minute. "No," he said finally. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. Sirzechs' smile faltered. Lord Grimoire flinched. "I don't understand," Sirzechs said, struggling to keep his composure. We would grant you status equal to the highest nobility. You would have the power and influence of two of the great pillar houses at your disposal. I don't care about status or influence, Naruto interrupted, his voice still calm but now laced with an edge of steel. I spent my entire life fighting against people who treated others as tools, as possessions to be controlled. You want to save them from being used as pawns by forcing them into a different cage, one built by you. The answer is no. Rias and Sona stared at him, stunned into silence. They had been prepared to argue, to fight, to defy this stranger. They had not been prepared for him to defend them. For the first time, a flicker of something other than suspicion entered their eyes. Naruto turned his gaze back to the two heiresses. You two, he said, his voice softening again. Do you want this? Rias, caught off guard, stammered, I do not wish to marry Rias Sona. But this is. I require more data before making an informed decision, Sona cut in, her voice clinical but unable to hide the slight tremor of uncertainty. However, the premise is less than ideal. Naruto nodded. Right, so you don't want to be forced into a marriage you didn't choose. He looked back at Sirzechs. I've fought wars for less noble causes. A glimmer of hope appeared in Sirzechs' eyes. Then you will help. I didn't say that, Naruto replied. I won't be your weapon, and I won't be their new jailer. If I agree to anything, it will be on my terms. Name them, Sirzechs said instantly. First, Naruto said, holding up a finger, this isn't a marriage. It's an alliance. I will be their partner, not their owner. They will have the final say in anything that concerns them. Their freedom is the goal, not a casualty. He held up a second finger. Second, I am not your subject. I am not a devil. I will not be bound by your laws or your politics unless I choose to be. I am an ally, not a citizen. He held up a third. And third, I want a good bowl of ramen. Miso ramen with extra pork. It's been a long day. The last demand was so unexpected that Lord Grimori let out a small, choked laugh before quickly stifling it. Sirzechs stared at him, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. He had summoned a force of nature, all right. Just not the kind he had expected. Your terms are acceptable. He gestured to Grafia, who had been standing silently by the wall this entire time. She stepped forward, holding a rolled-up scroll of pristine white parchment tied with a golden ribbon. The contract of alliance, Sirzechs announced. It details the terms, binding all parties to the protection and support of the others. It will nullify all prior engagements. Grafia offered the scroll to Naruto. He took it, his eyes scanning the two young women before him. He saw the maelstrom of emotions in Rias's eyes, hope, fear, confusion. He saw the frantic calculations in Sona's, weighing the risks and rewards. He untied the ribbon and unrolled the scroll. The text was written in the same glowing runes as the summoning circle. As he looked at it, he could feel it. It was more than just ink on parchment. There was a subtle, insidious magic woven into the very fibers of the scroll, a compulsion spell designed to ensure compliance, to subtly bend the will of the signatory to the will of the contract's creator. It was masterfully crafted, almost undetectable. Almost. Rias and Sona watched him, their breath held. This was the moment of truth. Naruto didn't say a word. He didn't point out the deception. He simply rested his thumb on the signature line at the bottom of the scroll. He channeled a minuscule, almost non-existent amount of his chakra, the pure, life-giving energy of a sage, into the parchment. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the intricate runes on the scroll flared with a brilliant golden light. They flashed once, twice, and then fizzled out, turning from a vibrant, magical script into dull, mundane ink. The subtle, coercive magic woven into the contract dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind a simple, powerless piece of paper. The display was not explosive. It was not a grand show of power. It was quiet, precise, and utterly absolute. It was the effortless gesture of a master dismantling a child's toy. Sirzechs' eyes widened. Grafia's professional mask finally slipped, revealing a flicker of pure astonishment. Lord Citri took a sharp, involuntary breath. Lord Glacia Labelas, who had been sneering in the shadows, felt a chill run down his spine that was eerily reminiscent of the silent void he had glimpsed earlier. Rias and Sona just stared. The man before them had not only seen through the subtle trap laid by Som E of the most powerful devils in existence, he had dismantled it with less effort than it took to breathe. He hadn't done it to show off. He had done it simply because it was there, an obstacle to be removed. Naruto looked up from the now harmless scroll, his placid smile back in place. "All right," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Where do I sign?" He accepted the offered quill, signed his name with a flourish, and handed the scroll back. The pact was sealed. The die was cast. The political landscape of the underworld had just been hit by a maelstrom. Later, after the stunned lords and elders had departed, Sirzechs had led them to a private suite in the Grimoire Palace. It was opulent, with furniture carved from dark, polished wood and fabrics the color of wine and royalty. A large window looked out upon the crimson sky. Naruto ignored the luxury, walking straight to the window. He gazed out at the alien landscape, a world of deep reds and purples, of jagged mountains and strange, glowing flora. It was beautiful, in a way, but it wasn't home. Rias and Sona stood awkwardly in the center of the room, the silence stretching between the three of them. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind a confusing tangle of relief and apprehension. "So," Rias began, breaking the silence, her voice much softer than before. "You were to be our partner." "Looks that way," Naruto replied, not turning from the window. "Why did you do it?" Sona asked, her voice sharp with genuine curiosity. "Why did you agree? And why did you defend us?" Naruto was silent for a moment, watching a flock of strange, bat-winged creatures fly past in the distance. "Because," he said, finally turning to face them, his blue eyes holding a depth that seemed as vast as the sky itself. "I know what it's like to have your destiny decided for you. To have everyone look at you and see a monster, or a weapon, or a prize. I fought my whole life for the right to choose my own path. It seems why fair that everyone else gets that same chance." He gave them a small, tired smile. "That, and I was serious about the ramen. I'm starving." The unexpected sincerity, followed by the mundane complaint, broke the last of the tension. Rias let out a small, unladylike snort of laughter, quickly covering her mouth. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of Sona's lips. For the first time, they weren't looking at a political tool, an unknown variable, or a mysterious otherworldly being. They were looking at a person. They were looking at Naruto Uzumaki. And their lives would never be the same. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Phoenix's Plight. The aroma of rich pork broth, miso, and perfectly cooked noodles filled the small kitchen of the Kuo Academy Occult Research Club building. For the past 2 days, this repurposed, vaguely Gothic structure had served as a temporary headquarters and residence for the newly formed alliance. It was a place Naruto found surprisingly comfortable, a far cry from the sterile grandeur of the Grimoire Palace. It felt lived in, like a home. He sat at a small dining table, hunched over a steaming bowl of ramen that Akano Himehime, Rias's stunningly beautiful queen, had managed to procure with a cheerfully mischievous smile. It wasn't Ichiraku, but it was a damn good substitute. He slurped the noodles with an appreciative gusto that seemed to echo in the otherwise quiet room. Across from him, Rias Grimoire and Sona Citri sat with a quiet, almost clinical stiffness, picking at the far more elegant meals Akano had prepared for them. The members of their respective peerages were scattered around the large club room, trying and failing to act casual. Kiba Yuto, Rias's handsome knight, polished his sword with a focused intensity that was clearly forced. Kaneko Tuju, her petite rook, was curled up on a sofa, munching on a chocolate bar, but her amber eyes never strayed far from Naruto. Sona's queen, the equally bespectacled and serious Tsubaki Shinra, stood near her king, a notebook in hand, occasionally jotting down observations. The atmosphere was a strange cocktail of tension and curiosity. They had witnessed him neutralize a binding contract woven by a great Satan. But they still didn't know what he was. He wasn't a devil, angel, or fallen. He didn't radiate holy or demonic power. His energy, his chakra, was a placid lake, and they had no idea how deep it went. "Is it truly necessary to eat with such enthusiasm?" Rias commented, dabbing her lips with a napkin. There was no real heat in her words, only a kind of bewildered fascination. Naruto paused mid-slurp, a noodle dangling from his lips. He looked at her, then at his bowl, and then back at her. It's a sign of respect to the chef, he said, before inhaling the rest of the noodle with a satisfying zip. You're supposed to enjoy good food, not interrogate it. Sona adjusted her glasses. From a tactical standpoint, rapid consumption of rations is an efficient way to minimize downtime during field operations. However, in a non-combat environment, one could argue it demonstrates a lack of situational awareness. Naruto grinned. Or it could mean I was hungry. He pointed his chopsticks at them. You two need to relax. We're allies, not prisoners of war. All this tiptoeing around is going to drive me crazy. Before either of them could formulate a response, the air in the room shimmered. A glowing, crimson magic circle, the crest of the House of Grimoire, materialized in the center of the floor. Graphia Lucifuge stepped out of it, her expression as serene and unreadable as ever. Lady Rias, Lady Sona, Lord Naruto, she said, her voice a calm, silver bell as she gave a slight bow. Her inclusion of Naruto in the formal address did not go unnoticed. The peerage members straightened up immediately. Graphia, what is it? Rias asked, rising from her seat. Has something happened? A message has arrived from Lord Phoenix, Graphia announced, her tongue leaving no doubt as to the gravity of the situation. He dismisses the alliance contract as an unfortunate and childish outburst, and reasserts the validity of the original engagement pact. She paused, her silver eyes meeting Naruto's for a fraction of a second. His son, Rias Phoenix, has just breached the dimensional barrier around Kuo Town. He is on his way to the academy. His intent is, and I quote, to retrieve his property and discipline his wayward bride. A wave of cold fury washed over Rias's face. Her demonic energy, a crimson aura of destructive power, flared around her, causing the teacups on the table to tremble. He dares. After everything, he dares to come here and speak of me as property. Sona stood as well, her expression hardening into a mask of icy resolve. The arrogance of the Phoenix clan is truly without limit. This is a direct challenge not only to you, Rias, but to my family and to Sirzechs himself. The peerages were on their feet, their own energies flaring, ready for battle. Kiba's hand was on the hilt of his sword, lightning crackling around Akino's fingers. Naruto, however, remained seated. He calmly picked up his bowl, drank the last of the broth, and set it down with a quiet clack. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and let out a contented sigh. Finally, he said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. Something interesting. He stood up, stretching his arms over his head. I was getting tired of all the talking. Let's go say hello to the walking chicken. The grounds of Kuo Academy had become a stage. On one side, near the main school building, stood Rias, Sona, and their peerages. Their stances were defiant, their faces grim. Rias's crimson aura pulsed with rage, a stark contrast to the cool, calculated blue energy that shimmered around Sona. Opposite them, in the center of the track field, a pillar of roaring orange flame erupted, scorching the grass black. When the fire subsided, Rias Phoenix stood there, arms spread wide as if expecting applause. He was handsome in a way that was almost too perfect, with short blonde hair and a condescending smirk permanently etched on his face. He was flanked by his 15-piece peerage, a collection of beautiful women in revealing outfits who looked at Rias and her companions with undisguised contempt. Rias, my darling. Rias's voice boomed across the field, dripping with false affection. Did you truly think this little tantrum would change anything? A contract is a contract. Now, be a good girl and dismiss your little friends. Rias has come to take you home. I am not your darling. And I will never be your property, Rias. Rias shot back, her voice shaking with fury. This alliance is recognized by my brother, Sirzechs Lucifer. You have no claim here. Rias laughed, a grating, arrogant sound. Ah yes, the alliance. His eyes scanned the group and finally landed on Naruto, who was standing slightly in front of the two heiresses, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. And I see you've found a new pet. A human, of all things. Did you pick him up from the gutter, Rias? He certainly looks the part. Naruto didn't react to the insult. He simply tilted his head, his calm, blue eyes studying the Phoenix air. This one reeks of arrogance, Kurama rumbled inside his mind. It's a familiar smell. Reminds me of the Uchiha before Madara put them in their place. He's all flair and no substance, Naruto thought back, his focus unwavering. Look at his energy. It's powerful, but it's wild, unfocused. Like a leaky faucet. I'm going to give you one chance, Riser. Naruto said, his voice carrying easily across the field without him needing to shout. Take your women and go home. Forget about these contracts. Forget about this place. Do that, and you can walk away with your pride intact. The sheer audacity of the offer stunned everyone into silence for a moment. Then Riser threw his head back and roared with laughter. You offer me, Riser Phoenix, a chance to walk away. You, a lowly human, dare to address nobility in such a manner. He sneered, a ball of fire igniting in his palm. My family is legendary for our immortality. I cannot be harmed. You pathetic insect. You Belluna. He barked at his queen. Teach this trash his place. Make it painful. The woman with the long purple hair, his queen, stepped forward with a confident smirk. With pleasure, my lord, she began to chant, a complex array of magic circles appearing around her. But before she could even finish the first verse, Naruto vanished. He didn't move fast. He simply ceased to be where he was and appeared directly in front of her. The air didn't even ripple. Her eyes widened in shock. She had no time to scream, no time to react. He gently tapped her on the forehead with 2 fingers. A small, swirling ball of blue chakra, a perfectly controlled Rasengan no bigger than his fingertip, spun against her skin for a fraction of a second. It didn't explode. It simply imparted a precise, targeted burst of rotational energy. Yubeluna's eyes rolled back into her head, and she collapsed in a neat pile, completely unconscious. A collective gasp went through the crowd. What? Riser sputtered. Before he could finish the word, Naruto was gone again. He moved through Riser's peerage like a ghost, a silent, orange blur. One moment, he was in front of a sword-wielding knight, the next. She was on the ground, disarmed and unconscious. A tap to the back of the neck for a rook, a gentle chop to the side of a bishop's head. He moved with an effortless grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. He wasn't even using clones. It was pure, unadulterated speed. 14 women, a full peerage of trained devils, were neutralized in less than 3 seconds. Not a single one of them was seriously injured. They were just asleep. The field fell into a dead, ringing silence. Rias's and Sona's peerages stared, their mouths agape. This wasn't a fight. It was a demonstration. Naruto came to a stop a few feet in front of Riser, his hands back in his pockets as if he'd just taken a leisurely stroll. The arrogant smirk had been wiped clean from Riser's face, replaced by a mask of disbelief and dawning fear. Immortality, you said? Naruto asked, his voice still unnervingly calm. Rage, fueled by humiliation, finally overpowered Riser's fear. You bastard, he screamed, his body erupting in a massive pillar of fire. I'll burn you to ash. He unleashed a torrent of hellfire, a massive wave of orange flames that cooked the air and turned the grass to glass. It roared towards Naruto, a seemingly unstoppable inferno. Naruto didn't even flinch. He just stood there as the wall of fire washed over him. Rias cried out his name, a spike of fear piercing her anger. But when the flames subsided, he was still there, untouched, unburned. A faint, golden aura of chakra, almost invisible to the naked eye, had enveloped him, rendering the flames completely inert. The fire hadn't been blocked. It had been nullified. My turn, Naruto said softly. He took a single step forward, crossing the remaining distance between them in an instant. His hand shot out and clamped around Riser's throat, lifting the Phoenix air clear off the ground. Riser struggled, his feet kicking uselessly in the air. He tried to summon his flames, but the raw, oppressive power emanating from the man holding him was suffocating his magic. Your family's power isn't true immortality, Naruto said, his voice a low, cold whisper that only Riser could hear. It's just rapid regeneration, a powerful healing factor. It's a neat trick, but every trick has a counter. He tightened his grip. Riser choked, his eyes bulging. He could feel something wrong. The hand around his neck wasn't just crushing his windpipe. It was radiating an energy that felt like poison to his very soul. A chaotic, Blood-red chakra mixed with Naruto's own golden aura began to seep into him. It was Kurama's power, guided with surgical precision. It wasn't attacking his body, it was attacking the source of his power, the very concept of his regeneration. "Let's see what happens," Naruto murmured, "when we just turn it off." He pushed a final, concentrated pulse of that corrosive energy into Riser's system. There was a sound like tearing fabric, a sound that no one heard but Riser felt in the core of his being. The magical connection to his family's regenerative abilities, the very thing that defined his existence, was severed. It wasn't damaged, it was erased. Naruto dropped him. Riser crumpled to the ground, gasping for air, clutching his throat. For the first time in his life, he felt pain. Not the fleeting sensation of an injury that was already healing, but true, lingering, agonizing pain. His throat was bruised, his lungs burned, and the terrifying, absolute certainty that these feelings would not just vanish settled deep in his bones. He was mortal, he was breakable. He looked up at Naruto, who loomed over him like a god of judgment, his blue eyes as cold as the void. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a primal, soul-shattering terror. "The deal's off the table now," Naruto said, his voice returning to a normal, conversational volume. "Now you will leave. You will annul the contract. You will never speak to Rias or Sona again. You will never set foot in this town again. If you do, I will not be so gentle." He leaned down, his face inches from Riser's. "And just so you know, I can give your immortality back. Just as easily as I took it. But you'll have to earn it. Do we have an understanding?" Riser could only manage a series of pathetic, terrified nods, tears of pain and humiliation streaming down his face. Naruto straightened up and turned his back on the broken devil, walking back towards the stunned group of onlookers. "Someone should probably wake up his entourage and send them packing," he said casually, as if he'd just finished a light workout. The silence held for another moment before Kiba let out a low whistle. "Well, I'd say that message was received." Akeno giggled, fanning herself with her hand. My, to think such power was hiding behind that handsome face. It makes me tingle with excitement." Sona pushed her glasses up, her mind furiously processing what she had just witnessed. It wasn't just the power, it was the absolute, flawless control. He hadn't caused any collateral damage. He hadn't killed anyone. He hadn't even truly harmed Riser's peerage. He had identified the core of the problem, Riser's arrogance, fueled by his immortality, and surgically removed it with the least amount of effort and destruction possible. It was the most brutally efficient and elegant solution she had ever seen. Rias simply stared, her heart hammering in her chest. A whirlwind of emotions churned within her. Overwhelming relief, profound gratitude, and a powerful, undeniable wave of attraction. He hadn't just defeated Riser. He had shattered the very foundation of his pride. All to protect her freedom. He was more than a political ally, more than a powerhouse. He was magnificent. As Riser's now conscious peerage scrambled to help their broken lord, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion, Yubeluna, his queen, pushed herself to her feet. Her head throbbed, but her eyes were fixed on Naruto's back. In her hand, she clutched a small, obsidian charm that seemed to absorb the light around it. As Naruto had held Riser, suspended between worlds, she had felt a terror so complete that she had prayed. Not to Lucifer, not to any devil lord, but to a promise she had received in a dream. A promise of power from a silent, empty god that offered solace in nothingness. A whisper in the back of her mind had told her that the man in orange was an anathema. A discordant note in the grand, silent symphony that was to come. She tucked the charm away, her fear now mixed with a chilling, newfound purpose. Later that evening, the atmosphere in the occult research club was transformed. The tension was gone, replaced by a palpable sense of awe and respect. The peerage members treated Naruto not as an outsider, but as their undisputed champion. He was sitting on the sofa, trying to explain the rules of shogi to an interested Kaneko, when Rias and Sona approached. They stood before him, their earlier stiffness completely gone. "Naruto," Rias began, her voice soft and filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "I thank you. You did more than just defeat him. You gave me back my freedom." "He was a bully," Naruto said, looking up from the game board. And I don't like bullies. Your methods were unconventional, Sona added, a rare, small smile on her face. But undeniably effective. Your control is remarkable. You have my gratitude, and my respect. Happy to help, he said with a simple shrug. He looked between the two of them, seeing the genuine appreciation in their eyes. For the first time since arriving in this strange, new world, he felt a sense of purpose, a familiar warmth of camaraderie. It felt good. So, he said, breaking the heavy emotional moment with his usual directness. What's for dinner? That, negotiating, made me hungry again. Rias let out a genuine, musical laugh, the sound filling the room with a warmth that had been absent before. Sona's smile widened. They exchanged a look over his head, a silent, shared understanding passing between them. The arrogant phoenix had been grounded. A pact of convenience was slowly, unexpectedly, forging itself into a bond of genuine trust. And in the shadows, a silent god had taken notice of the storm that had just made landfall in Kuo. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Hallowed Ground, Unholy Whispers. The week following the Riser incident settled into a strange, yet comfortable routine. The Occult Research Club building became a neutral ground, a hub of activity where the Grimoire and Citri peerages coexisted with a surprising lack of friction. The looming threat of a forced marriage had been so utterly vaporized that a collective sigh of relief seemed to permanently hang in the air. At the center of this new calm was Naruto, a quiet Su. And around which these two powerful houses now orbited. He spent his days observing. He watched Sona and her peerage engage in complex strategic simulations on a magical chessboard, their minds working in a synergy that reminded him of Shikamaru's best-laid plans. He sparred with Kiba, whose speed and swordsmanship were impressive, though his movements lacked the life-or-death economy Naruto was used to. He traded jokes with Akano, whose flirtatious teasing was so over the top it looped back around to being genuinely funny, and even managed to coax a few rare, small smiles from the stoic Kaneko. By sharing his senjutsu-enhanced senses to help her find the best napping spots. He was a curiosity, a puzzle they were all trying to solve. But he was also, undeniably, one of them. He was their shield, the unspoken guarantee of their newfound freedom. This morning, he was sitting on the grass outside the club building, attempting to teach Rias the basics of molding nature chakra. Forget about your power of destruction, he instructed, his voice calm. He held a simple leaf in his palm. That's like using a sledgehammer to knock in a thumbtack. This is about balance. Feel the life in the world around you. The tree, the grass, the wind, it's all connected. Just listen to it. And then, gently, ask it to listen back. Rias sat opposite him, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was a prodigy of demonic power, able to command forces that could level mountains. But this was different. The subtle, life-affirming energy he spoke of was the antithesis of her Grimoire heritage. She held a leaf in her own hand, trying to will it. To command it, to stick to her skin. It fluttered and fell to the ground for the 10th time. This is impossible, she sighed in frustration, her crimson hair falling across her face. My energy is destructive. It doesn't ask things. It tells them. That's because you're thinking of it as your energy, Naruto corrected gently. It's not. You're just borrowing it. You're a conduit, not a container. He picked up another leaf and, with a simple thought, made it stick to his forehead. He crossed his eyes trying to look at it, a goofy expression that made her laugh despite her frustration. It was in that moment of shared laughter that Kiba Yuto burst from the club building, his handsome face pale and drawn. Rias, he called out, his voice tight with pain. Something's coming. Something. Holy. He clutched his chest, his expression pained. I can feel them. Fragments of Excalibur. The name hung in the air, instantly dispelling the morning's peace. Rias was on her feet in an instant. Her playful demeanor gone, replaced by the commanding presence of a high-class devil. How many? She demanded. 2. Kiba gasped. The presence is strong. They're on academy grounds. Before another word could be said, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the direction of an old, abandoned church on the edge of the school property. It was followed by a urge of holy power so potent that every devil present recoiled, hissing in discomfort. Naruto stood up, the leaf falling from his forehead. He looked towards the church, his sage mode senses already active. He could feel them. 2 distinct signatures, bright and sharp like shards of glass. But beneath their holy power, he felt something else: youth, inexperience, and a rigid, unyielding conviction that bordered on fanaticism. "Stay here," Rias commanded her peerage. "Sona and I will handle this." "We're coming with you," Sona said, emerging from the building with her own peerage in tow, her face a grim mask. "This is a violation of our treaty with the church." Naruto fell into step beside them as they moved towards the source of the disturbance. "So, what's an Excalibur?" he asked, his tone as casual as if he were asking about the weather. "It was the legendary holy sword," Sona explained, her strides quick and efficient. "After the Great War, it was shattered into 7 fragments. The church has been trying to reassemble them for centuries. For exorcists, they are relics of immense power. And exorcists don't usually come knocking on the front door of a devil-controlled territory," Rias added, her eyes narrowed. "This is a provocation." They arrived at the clearing in front of the old church to a scene of controlled chaos. A robed priest, Fried Selzen, a manic stray with a crazed grin and a light-powered pistol, lay twitching on the ground, clearly defeated. Standing over him were 2 young women. One was tall, with blue hair and a determined, stoic expression. She was lad in a form-fitting combat suit and held a massive, unwieldy sword that pulsed with a raw, unrefined holy power. It was less a blade and more a slab of sharpened steel. The other was shorter, with light brown hair tied in twin tails. And her expression was one of cheerful, bubbly righteousness. She wielded a more elegant, rapier-like Excalibur fragment that shimmered with an almost ethereal light. "Devils," the blue-haired woman, Zenobia Quarta, stated, her voice flat and cold as she turned to face them. "You have defiled this hallowed ground with your presence. This area is now under the protection of the Vatican. Leave, or be purified." "Hallowed ground," Rias scoffed, her demonic power beginning to rise. "This is Grimoire territory, sanctioned by the treaty between the 3 factions. You are the trespassers here, exorcists." Quote, the girl with the twin tails, Irina Shido, put her hands on her hips, her cheerful demeanor a bizarre contrast to the threat of holy annihilation in the air. "Oh, don't be silly. A place of God can't be devil territory. That's like saying a fish can own the sky. We're here on a holy mission to retrieve the stolen Excalibur fragments. Lord Michael himself has sanctioned it. You will address the heiress of the House of Grimoire with respect." Akino's voice was a low purr, but it was laced with the threat of thunder and lightning. The air crackled with power. A standoff between holy and demonic energy. Zenobia raised her massive sword, its holy aura flaring. Rias's hands began to glow with the power of destruction. And then, Naruto stepped between them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flare his own power. He just walked into the space between the 2 factions, turning his back on Rias and her group to face the 2 exorcists. "That's enough," he said. The command was so quiet, so devoid of threat, yet it carried an authority that made everyone pause. Zenobia glared at him, her eyes narrowing. "A human, siding with devils. You are a traitor to your own kind. Step aside, or you will share their fate." Naruto ignored her. His eyes were focused on their swords. "Those blades, they feel incomplete, unbalanced, powerful, but they're hurting you, aren't they?" The question was so unexpected it threw both girls off guard. "What?" Irina stammered. "Every time you channel your holy energy through them, it scrapes against your own life force," Naruto continued. His gaze analytical. "It's a subtle thing. You probably don't even notice it now, but in 10 years. 20, you'll be burned out from the inside. A weapon that destroys its wielder isn't a very good weapon." Zenobia's grip on her sword tightened. He was right. She had always felt the drain, the cold hollowness after a prolonged battle, but had accepted it as the price of wielding such holy power. How could this human see that in a single glance? "Our faith is our shield," she declared, her voice laced with a conviction that was slightly forced. "We gladly give our lives in service to God." "You give your lives to the people who tell you what God wants," Naruto corrected, his voice still gentle but now carrying a sharp, cutting edge. "There's a difference. They point you at an enemy, you attack. They tell you are evil, you believe them. Did you ever stop and ask why? Or did you just follow the order?" His words struck a nerve. He wasn't insulting their faith. He was questioning their autonomy. "We are soldiers of God," Irina insisted, though her cheerful mask was beginning to crack. "We don't question his will." "I used to be a soldier, too," Naruto said, and for the first time. A profound weariness entered his voice. It was the sound of old wars and remembered pain. "I was a weapon for my village. They pointed me at enemies, and I destroyed them. I thought I was fighting for peace. For my friends. But the men giving the orders, they were just playing a game, moving pieces on a board. And the pieces were people. People like you. People like me." He looked directly at Xenovia, his blue eyes piercing her stoic facade. "They tell you we're devils, so we must be evil. But look behind me. Do you see monsters? Or do you see a group of people protecting their home? You came here with swords drawn, making demands. They only reacted when you threatened them." Behind him, Rias and the others stood in stunned silence. They had been ready for a battle, a clash of power and wills. They were not prepared for this. He was defending them not with his power, but with his words, with his own past. He was stripping away the labels of devil and exorcist, and revealing the scared, indoctrinated children underneath. Sona watched, her analytical mind completely captivated. This was a strategy she had never conceived of, dismantling an enemy's entire ideology with nothing but empathy. You don't know anything about us," Xenovia said, but her voice faltered. The seed of doubt had been planted. "I know you were raised to be weapons," Naruto replied softly. "Just like I was. And I'm telling you there's another way. A harder way. You have to choose your own path, believe in your own heart, not just the words someone else puts in your mouth." He gestured back to Rias and Sona. "I'm allied with them not because I'm evil, but because they are fighting for their own freedom. Just like I did. What are you fighting for? The swords, or the men who sent you to get them?" He took a step back, leaving the space between them open again. "The choice is yours. You can try to purify us. It won't end well for you. Or, you can lower your swords, and we can actually talk about this like people instead of symbols." Xenovia and Irina stood frozen, his words echoing in the silence. Their entire black and white world had just been challenged by a man in an orange jacket who spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had seen the very worst of the world and had chosen not to be broken by it. Slowly, hesitantly, Xenovia lowered the tip of her massive sword until it touched the ground. Irina, after a moment's hesitation, followed suit. The immediate threat had passed. Miles away, perched atop the bell tower of a desecrated church, a man with black feathered wings watched the scene unfold through a magical projection. Kokobile, a leader of the fallen angels and a war hawk of the highest order, let out a low, guttural laugh. Well, what have we here?" he mused, his eyes glowing with a manic light. "Sirzechs' little sister has found herself a new protector. And he fights with words. How quaint." Beside him, the rogue priest Fried Selzen was still giggling. His mind clearly unhinged from his brief encounter with the exorcists. "Should have let me carve 'em up, boss." Rip, tear, splatter. Kokobile ignored him. He was focused on Naruto's energy signature. It was alien, powerful, and strangely clean. It didn't belong. It was a discordant note in a world he was trying to bring to a perfect, final silence. "He's the anathema," Kokobile whispered. The words sounding like a prayer. The one the whispers warned about. For years, since the news of the biblical god's death had reached him, Kokobile had felt a profound emptiness. His purpose, his very reason for being, to fight, to rebel, to strive against a seemingly omnipotent foe, had been rendered meaningless. He had fallen into a deep, nihilistic despair, until the whispers had started. They came from the spaces between thoughts, from the moments of absolute quiet. They didn't speak of power or glory, but of a beautiful, perfect peace. The peace of non-existence. They showed him a vision of a silent, starless void, an end to the pointless cycle of life and death, of war and suffering. He had found a new god, an ultimate god. The silent one, starting another gray. At war was no longer about pride or revenge. It was a holy mission. The chaos, the death, the destruction, it would all weaken the fabric of reality, disrupt the flow of life energy, and help to shatter the ancient seals that kept his new god slumbering. And this newcomer, this Naruto Uzumaki, was a threat to that. His energy felt creative, vital, stubbornly alive. He was a builder in a world Kokobile wanted to demolish. Valpier, Kokobile said into a communication circle. Proceed with the project. Gather the remaining fragments. And let our pet exorcists continue to clash with the devils. Let them exhaust each other. He smiled, a chilling expression devoid of all warmth. The overture is over. It's time for the first act to begin. Back at Kuo Academy, an uneasy truce had been called. Zenobia and Irina, their convictions shaken, agreed to hold off on hostilities and investigate the matter of the stolen swords further, though they refused any offer of hospitality. They departed with a final, lingering look at Naruto. Their expressions a mixture of confusion, resentment, and a flicker of something akin to respect. As the Grimoire and Citri groups walked back to the club building, the mood was somber. I have never seen anything like that, Sona admitted, pushing her glasses up her nose. Yuta escalated a potentially violent international incident with a lecture on philosophy. It wasn't a lecture, Naruto said, his hands behind his head as he walked. It was the truth. They're just kids who've been told who their enemies are their whole lives. Someone had to tell them they had a choice. Rias was quiet, walking beside him. She hadn't seen him unleash overwhelming power. She had seen him bare a piece of his soul, using his own pain as a bridge to connect with his enemies. It was a form of strength she had never encountered before, an emotional clarity that was far more intimidating than any destructive aura. She found herself wanting to know more, to understand the wars he had fought, the pain he had endured that had forged him into the man who stood beside her. He was no longer just her protector. He was becoming something more, something she hadn't realized she was looking for. Naruto, she said softly, and he turned to look at her. His eyes, once so full of a weary wisdom, were now back to their normal, clear blue. Yeah, thank you, she said, and this time, the words meant something different. It wasn't gratitude for her freedom. It was gratitude for his presence. For showing me that there's more than one way to win a fight. He just smiled, a simple, easy grin that reached his eyes. Anytime. The seeds of doubt had been planted in the hearts of two young exorcists. And in the heart of a certain crimson-haired devil heiress, a different kind of seed had just begun to sprout. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Dragon's Roar, the Fox's Wisdom. The back lawn of the Occult Research Club had become Issei Hyodo's personal training ground and, more often than not, his stage for spectacular failure. He stood panting, his school uniform disheveled and stained with sweat, his left arm encased in the crimson gauntlet of the boosted gear. Boost, 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 boost. The gem on the gauntlet pulsed with green light, the disembodied voice of a Welsh dragon echoing with each declaration. Issei's demonic energy spiked with each repetition, a wild, untamed aura of power flaring around him. All right, here I go, he roared, pulling his arm back. My super awesome, sure kill technique. Dragon shot. He thrust his fist forward, and a torrent of crimson energy erupted from the gauntlet. It was powerful, undeniably so, but it was also chaotic. The beam careened wildly, missing the practice dummy Kiba had set up by a good 10 feet, and exploded against the protective barrier Sona had erected around the training area. The barrier flickered violently, but held. Issei slumped to his knees, panting. Damn it, why can't I control it? Rias stood nearby, a patient but slightly strained smile on her face. You're putting too much raw power into it, Issei. You need to focus on the shape, the trajectory. Visualize the path you want the energy to take. My, Issei-kun. Akeno added with a sultry giggle, you're so full of explosive energy. Perhaps you just need a more hands-on approach to release it. From the shade of a large oak tree, Naruto watched, nursing a cup of tea Akeno had made. It was surprisingly good. He observed the scene with a quiet, analytical eye. They were trying to teach Issei technique, to give him instructions. But they were missing the root of the problem. Issei didn't lack control over his power. He lacked control over himself. His desire was a jumbled mess of hormonal teenage urges, a genuine desire to protect his new friends, and a desperate, deep-seated insecurity about being the weakest member of the group. He saw the boosted gear as a shortcut to becoming the Harem King, a title he shouted to the heavens but didn't truly understand. The power was responding to that chaotic whirlwind of intent, and so it, too, was chaotic. The boy's desire is strong, Kurama noted from within their shared mental landscape. The dragon sealed within him is no weakling, either. But the vessel is full of cracks. The power is leaking out in all directions before it can even be aimed. He thinks power is the goal, Naruto replied mentally. He doesn't get that power is a consequence. It's the byproduct of having something you're willing to die to protect. Naruto was about to intervene, to offer a different approach, when a sudden, jarring sensation pricked at his senses. It was a flicker of malevolence, sharp and cold, erupting from the town center. It was followed by the faint sound of a scream, cut short. Every devil in the vicinity felt it a moment later. Rias's expression snapped from patient teacher to stern leader. A stray devil, in broad daylight. That's bold. The energy signature is weak, Kiba observed. His hand already on his sword. But it feels wrong. Unclean. Issei, stay here, Rias commanded. This is a job for the rest of us. No way. Issei shot back, scrambling to his feet. I'm not a kid. I'm part of this peerage. I'm supposed to protect you, President. This is my chance to prove it. Before Rias could argue, Naruto stood up and placed a hand on her shoulder. Let him come, he said. His voice calm but firm. He's right. He needs this. Rias hesitated, then nodded. All right, but you stay close to Kiba. The group moved with supernatural speed, Naruto easily keeping pace. They arrived at a small, secluded park near the center of town. Benches were overturned. A child's tricycle lay on its side, one wheel still spinning slowly. In the center of the park stood a creature that was a grotesque parody of a devil. It was humanoid, but its limbs were too long, its skin the color of old bruises. It had no eyes, only a smooth expanse of skin where they should have been. And its mouth was locked in a silent, jagged grin. But the most unsettling thing about it was the aura it projected. It was an aura of profound emptiness. The air around it seemed muted, the colors of the grass and flowers slightly faded. The cheerful sounds of the town were muffled, as if they were being absorbed by a pocket of absolute silence. In front of the creature lay two unconscious civilians. Their faces pale but their chests still rising and falling. The stray hadn't been feeding. It had been waiting. What is that thing? Asia Argento, Rias's gentle bishop, whispered, clutching her hands to her chest in fear. It feels hollow, Kaneko stated, her usual deadpan expression tinged with unease. The creature's eyeless face turned towards them, its grin widening. It fixed on Issei, or more specifically, on the latent power of the boosted gear. A faint, raspy whisper seemed to emanate from it, a sound that felt like it was spoken directly inside their minds. So much noise, so much potential for beautiful, perfect silence. I'll take this thing down. Issei roared, his bravado a thin shield for his fear. He activated his gauntlet, the dragon's call a defiant shout against the creeping emptiness. This is for messing up my town. Issei, wait, analyze its movements first. Sona called out, but it was too late. Issei charged, his fist glowing. He was faster and stronger than a normal human. But the stray devil was unnaturally fluid. It sidestepped his clumsy punch with an eerie grace, its long-fingered hand lashing out like a whip. It raked across Issei's chest, tearing through his uniform and leaving 3 shallow, bleeding gashes. Issei cried out more in surprise than pain. Weak, the voice whispered in his mind. You can't even protect yourself. How can you protect her? The pretty crimson girl. She'll throw you away. Shut up, Issei yelled, swinging again. The stray ducked under his arm, its movements creating no sound, no rush of air. It was like fighting a hole in reality. It tapped him lightly on the back of the head, and though the blow was physically weak, it sent a jolt of chilling, negative energy through him, making him stumble. You want power, the whisper continued, preying on his deepest insecurities. The harem king, you are nothing, a noisy child with a borrowed toy. Join the silence. There is no failure in nothingness, no disappointment. Issei, get back, it's attacking his mind, Rias shouted, preparing a sphere of destructive energy. The rest of her peerage moved to intervene, but a calm hand on her arm stopped her. It was Naruto. No, he said, his eyes fixed on the struggling boy. This is his fight. He has to win this, or it will break him. Issei was on his knees now, clutching his head, the whispers echoing in his mind. The stray loomed over him, its jagged grin a promise of annihilation. Naruto appeared beside Issei in a flicker of movement. He didn't look at the stray. He crouched down and looked Issei directly in the eyes. "Issei," he said, his voice cutting through the mental static. "Listen to me. Why are you fighting? To get stronger. To become the harem king." Issei stammered, his eyes unfocused. "Wrong answer," Naruto said flatly. "Look." He gestured with his head towards Rias, Asia, and the others. They were watching, their faces etched with worry. That thing wants to hurt them. It wants to erase them. Are you going to let it? Issei's gaze followed Naruto's, and something shifted in his eyes. He saw the genuine fear on Asia's face, the desperate concern in Rias's. They weren't pieces in his fantasy. They were his friends. They were his family. "No," Issei whispered, the word a spark in the darkness. "Good," Naruto said. "Forget the harem king. Forget getting stronger. That's all noise. Right here, right now. What is the one thing you truly desire, more than anything else?" Issei looked at the eyeless face of the stray devil, at its long claws reaching for him, and then back at Rias. The answer came to him, clear and simple, a single, brilliant point of light in the chaos of his mind. "I want to protect them," he said, his voice quiet but filled with a sudden, unshakable conviction. "I want to protect my president." A profound smile touched Naruto's lips. "There you go." He placed a hand on Issei's shoulder, and a warm, golden chakra flowed into the boy, not to give him power, but to steady him. "To calm the storm. Your rage is a fire. It burns bright, but it burns out fast and leaves you with nothing but ash. But the desire to protect someone, that's a sun. It'll never go out. Now get up, and show that dragon on your arm what a real sun looks like." Naruto stood and stepped back, leaving the battlefield to Issei once more. Something had changed. Issei pushed himself to his feet. His posture different. He was no longer a scared kid trying to act tough. He was a shield. The boosted gear flared to life, but this time, the crimson aura was different. It was stable, controlled, burning with a focused intensity instead of exploding in all directions. "Partner," DxD's voice echoed, not just from the gauntlet, but within Issei's soul. For the first time, it held a note of genuine respect. "You have finally found a worthy ambition. Now, let us show this creature the power of a true dragon." Boost. The amplification was clean, powerful. The energy didn't leak. It poured directly into Issei. "I see you," the stray whispered, a hint of confusion in its mental voice. A new noise, brighter, stronger. It must be silenced. The creature lunged, its movements a blur of silent motion. But Issei saw it coming. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He planted his feet, pulled back his fist, and focused on a single point, Rias's worried face. "Get away from my president," he bellowed, and this time, the roar was not of a boy, but of a dragon. He thrust his fist forward. The dragon shot that erupted from his gauntlet was not the wild, chaotic spray from before. It was a perfectly straight, tightly compressed beam of pure, destructive power. It was a crimson lance that screamed through the air and struck the stray devil dead center. There was no scream. There was just a flash of crimson light, and then, nothing. The stray devil didn't explode. It simply dissolved, unraveled by the sheer force of Issei's conviction. As the last of its form turned to dust, a final, faint whisper echoed in the minds of everyone present. "The age of silence is coming. Be consumed by the beautiful nothing." And then it was gone. Issei stood, his arms still outstretched. The gauntlet smoking. He was drained, exhausted, but he was standing. He had won. The rest of the ORC and the C-Tree peerage stared, speechless. They hadn't witnessed a simple battle. They had witnessed a transformation. Rias looked from the triumphant, exhausted Issei to the calmly smiling Naruto. He hadn't given Issei a new power or a secret technique. He had taught how to find the strength that was already inside him. He hadn't just trained a pawn, he had forged a knight. Her heart did a strange, unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Sona adjusted her glasses, her mind racing. The psychological effectiveness of Naruto's method was off the charts. He didn't address the symptoms of Issei's weakness, he had cured the disease. It was the most profound act of leadership she had ever witnessed. Later, after the civilians had been attended to and their memories gently altered by graphia, the group reconvened at the club. Issei, patched up by Asia, was uncharacteristically quiet. He found Naruto sitting on the steps outside, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Naruto-san. Naruto turned, giving him a small smile. Just Naruto is fine. You did good today, Issei. Thank you, Issei said, bowing his head. For what you did. I get it now. A little, I think. Yeah, it's not about the power, is it? Issei said, looking at his own hands. It's about what you do with it. Naruto clapped him on the shoulder, a firm, reassuring gesture. That's the whole game, right there. He stood up, looking out at the fading light. The strongest jutsu, the most powerful sacred gear, they don't mean a thing if you don't have someone you're willing to protect with them. Never forget that. Issei nodded, a new, quiet resolve settling in his heart. The path to becoming the harem king seemed a little silly now. The path to becoming a man who could stand proudly by Rias Grimori's side, however, that seemed like a journey worth taking. Naruto watched him go back inside, then turned his gaze back to the sky. Did you feel that, Kurama? He thought. The stray's energy. That nothingness. I did, the fox rumbled, his mental voice grim. It felt like the end of all things. Like the silence between stars. It's a power that shouldn't exist. It's an anti-chakra, an anti-life. The pieces were beginning to click into place. The elder's fleeting vision during the summoning. Kokobeel's nihilism. The stray's final words. This wasn't just a political struggle or a rogue faction causing trouble. There was a cancer growing in the heart of this world. A creeping entropy that called itself silence. And for a man who had spent his entire life making as much noise as possible, that was one enemy he could not ignore. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Shattered Sky. The peace was a fragile thing, a thin sheet of ice over a deep, cold ocean. Everyone felt it. In the days following the confrontation with the exorcists, unspoken tension had settled over Kuo Academy. Zenobia and Irina had vanished, pursuing their own leads on the stolen Excalibur fragments, but their presence lingered like a ghost. The incident with the hollow stray devil had left an even deeper chill. The words, "The age of silence is coming," echoed in the minds of those who had heard them. They were gathered in the Occult Research Club, the combined peerages of Grimori and Citri. Ostensibly to review the Academy's security protocols. In reality, it was a council of war, though no one had declared an enemy. Sona had a holographic map of the town projected over the main table, marking points of unusual energy fluctuation. Rias stood beside her, her arms crossed, her brow furrowed in thought. Naruto leaned against a far wall, content to observe. He had seen this countless times before. The quiet hum of activity before a storm, the desperate attempt to find patterns in the chaos. They were good at it, tactical and thorough, but they were preparing for a battle. He could feel it in his bones. They should be preparing for a war. The residual energy from the stray is completely inert, Sona was saying, pointing to a location on the map. It's not demonic, holy, or draconic. It's an absence of energy. A void. Our sensors can only detect it by measuring the lack of ambient magic around it. Kokobeel, Kiba said suddenly, his voice tight. Everyone turned to look at him. The normally cheerful knight was pale, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The leader of the fallen angels in charge of the Excalibur project. The one who orchestrated the theft. He's a cadre-class fallen, a veteran of the Great War. He's known for his love of chaos. You think he's behind the stray? Rias asked. I think the stray, the exorcists, he's stolen swords. They're all pieces on his board, Kiba replied grimly. He's trying to start something. As if summoned by the name, the very air in the room grew heavy. The lights flickered. A low, powerful hum vibrated through the floorboards, a sound so deep it was felt more than heard. Naruto was already moving, his head snapping up to look at the ceiling, his senses screaming a single, primal word, danger. Outside, now, he commanded, his voice devoid of its usual calm. It was the sharp, uncompromising tone of a battlefield commander. No one hesitated. They poured out of the building onto the school grounds. Their eyes drawn to the sky. The perpetually twilit sky of the underworld, visible through the dimensional barrier over the school, was gone. In its place was a colossal, intricate magic circle, miles wide, covering the entire academy. It glowed with a sickly purple light, a web of malevolent energy that pulsed like a diseased heart. At its very center, floating lazily as if he were sitting on an invisible throne, was a man with 10 magnificent black wings. He had long, black hair, a cruel, handsome face, and a bored, arrogant smirk. It was Kokobile. He was flanked by the mad priest Fried Selzen, who was cackling and juggling a glowing sword, and a massive, 3-headed hound the size of a bus, its eyes glowing with hellfire. Cerberus. Greetings, little devils. Kokobile's voice boomed from the sky, amplified by magic, washing over the town like a wave of pure malice. And a special hello to Sirzechs' precious little sister. I do hope you enjoy the show. I've gone to great lengths to arrange this little reunion. Kokobile. Rias shouted, her crimson aura flaring to life. What is the meaning of this? This is a direct violation of the treaty. Kokobile laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Treaty. Oh, the treaty. That tedious little piece of paper that keeps us from the game we were all born to play. He spread his arms wide, gesturing to the magic circle above them. I've grown so very tired of peace, Rias Grimori. It's so quiet, so I thought I'd start a war. A glorious, beautiful war that will shake the heavens and the abyss. And you, my dear, get to be the spark that lights the fuse. The magic circle pulsed, and the immense pressure it exerted intensified. It was a containment field, but it was also a weapon. A massive lance of light began to form at its center, pointed directly at the heart of Kuo Academy. When this lance strikes, it will obliterate this entire town, Kokobile announced with sadistic glee. Sirzechs will be forced to retaliate. Azazel will have no choice but to respond. Michael will cry his pathetic tears and send his armies. It will be magnificent. From the edge of the school grounds, 2 figures emerged from the shadows. Zenobia and Irina. Their faces were grim, their holy swords drawn. Kokobile. Zenobia yelled, in the name of the Vatican, cease this madness. An attack on the devils is one thing, but you will kill thousands of innocent humans. Kokobile glanced down at them with dismissive amusement. Ah, the church's little guard dogs. You're just in time. I have a wonderful, terrible truth to share with you all. A secret that your precious leaders have been hiding from you for centuries. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that still carried across the entire field. You pray, you fight, you die for a God who cannot hear you. You see, during the final days of the Great War, God was killed. The words struck with the force of a physical blow. Irina gasped, her face draining of all color, her cheerful demeanor shattering into a million pieces. Asia let out a small, choked cry and fell to her knees, her faith, the very core of her being, crumbling in an instant. Kiba staggered back, his face a mask of horrified disbelief. The Holy Sword Project, the years of pain, the comrades he had lost, all in the name of a dead god. It was a truth so monstrous it threatened to unmake him. Lies. Zenobia screamed, though her voice trembled with a sliver of doubt. Blasphemy. Is it? Kokobile chuckled. Then why hasn't he intervened? Why is it that the 4 great Satans lead the underworld, but only Michael, a mere archangel, sits on the throne of heaven? Open your eyes, you foolish children. The stage is empty. The script is meaningless. There is no grand plan. There is only the slow, inevitable march towards a beautiful, perfect silence. His nihilistic sermon was cut short by a calm, clear voice from the ground. You talk too much, Naruto said. Kokobile's gaze snapped down to him. The fallen angel's smirk faltered as he focused on the man in the orange jacket. You, the anathema, the discordant note. I've been called worse, Naruto replied, taking a step forward. He turned his head, not taking his eyes off the enemy in the sky. Sona, your peerage, defensive formations. Reinforce the school's barrier. Your primary objective is to stop that lance of light. Akano, Kiba, you're with me on offense. Kaneko, you're our mobile shield. Protect Asia at all costs. Rias, you're the heavy artillery. Wait for my signal. The orders were crisp, clear, and delivered with an absolute authority that left no room for argument. The 2 peerages, Once rivals, moved as one, their training and loyalty overriding their shock. Sona and her team immediately began chanting, weaving their own magic into the Academy's existing barrier, a second skin of blue energy forming over the first. You think your little devils can stop me? Kokobile sneered. Cerberus, play with them. The three-headed hound let out a reality-shaking roar and charged. It was a blur of black fur and hellfire, each head snapping and spewing flames. Kaneko met it head-on. The T.N.Y. girl slammed her fist into the ground, and a crater formed around her. You're not getting past me, she stated, her small frame radiating an immovable strength. She braced herself and caught the central head's lunge, her feet digging trenches in the earth as she held the beast back. Now, Kiba, Naruto yelled. Kiba, shaken from his despair by the immediacy of the command, summoned his sword. With a roar of rage and pain, he moved. A blur of motion, creating dozens of holy demonic swords that rained down on the beast, distracting its other two heads. Akeno, with pleasure. Akeno was already in the air, a sadistic smile on her face as massive bolts of holy lightning, a power inherited from her fallen angel father, crashed down from the sky, bathing the battlefield in a blinding light and making Cerberus howl in agony. While the peerages engaged the hound, Kokobile watched, his focus still on Naruto. Impressive leadership, but you cannot command your way out of this. You are a single, irritating sound in a world that craves silence. He raised a hand, and a dozen lances of pure light formed around him. Let's see if we can't quiet you down. The lances shot downwards with blinding speed. But Naruto was ready. He held out his hand, and three black spheres, darker than any shadow, materialized behind him, swirling with an energy that felt utterly alien. They shot forward, intercepting the lances of light. There was no explosion. The light simply touched the spheres and ceased to exist. Annihilated. Truth-seeking orbs. The sight of them sent a shockwave through the supernatural beings watching. Sirzechs and Graphia, monitoring the battle from the underworld, felt their jaws tighten. Azazel, lounging in his own domain, sat up straight, spilling his drink. That was the power of a sage. A power that stood outside their own systems, a power of creation and destruction that belonged to the genesis of a world. What is that? Kokobile hissed, his arrogant composure finally cracking, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. You wanted to see a god, Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. He rose into the air, his body cloaked in a brilliant, golden aura of chakra. His eyes were no longer just blue. They were golden, with the horizontal bar of a toad sage, but there was something else, a higher level of perception that seemed to see past the physical world. 6 paths sage mode. Fine, I'll show you one. Quote, he didn't charge. He simply appeared in front of Kokobile, his speed transcending mere movement. Before the fallen angel could even react, Naruto drove his fist into his gut. The blow was silent, but the shockwave it created was catastrophic. The air for 100 yards around them buckled. Kokobile coughed up blood, his 10 wings flaring in agony. Naruto wasn't finished. He spun, his legs sweeping around in a devastating kick that sent Kokobile careening towards the ground. The fallen angel crashed into the athletic field, the impact creating a massive crater, throwing up a cloud of dust and debris. Rias, now, Naruto yelled. On the ground, Rias had been gathering her power. She had watched Naruto, this man she was bound to, ascend to a level of power she couldn't have imagined. And it filled her with a fierce, burning pride. Hearing his call, she unleashed everything she had. A colossal sphere of pure, crimson and black destructive energy formed above her, crackling with unimaginable power. With a scream, she launched it at the crater. The explosion was deafening. A pillar of crimson light erupted into the sky, so bright it momentarily shed out the purple glow of Kokobile's grand spell. When the light faded, Kokobile was on one knee in the center of a smoking, glassed-over crater. His clothes were shredded, his wings were tattered, and his body was covered in burns. He was laughing, a broken, unhinged cackle. Yes, this is it, this power, this is the sound I must erase. He screamed, his eyes wild. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a zealot, a martyr for the cause of nothingness. The beautiful silence will claim you all. He raised his hands to the sky, and his body began to glow with a terrifying, self-destructive light. He was pouring all of his remaining life force into the giant lance of light above the school. He's going to force it. Sona screamed from the barrier. We can't hold it. You don't have to, Naruto said, his voice echoing from the sky. He floated above the crater, his arms crossed. One of his truth-seeking orbs shot upwards, not towards the lance, but towards the massive magic circle itself. The small black sphere touched the impossibly complex array of runes, and the effect was instantaneous. It was like a drop of ink in a glass of water. The blackness spread, not destroying the magic, but nullifying it. Unwriting it from existence. The complex runes fizzled and died. The sickly purple light faded. In seconds, the miles-wide spell, a creation of a Kadri-class fallen angel powered by his own life force, simply dissolved. The half-formed lance of light vanished with it, leaving only the normal, twilight sky. Kokobile stared, his jaw hanging open, his final, desperate gambit erased with casual, almost contemptuous ease. Before he could even process it, Naruto was in front of him again. He placed a hand gently on the fallen angel's forehead. A swirling vortex of golden chakra, a Rasengan of pure sage energy, spun in his palm. It's over, Naruto said. The Rasengan pressed forward. The last thing Kokobile saw was not anger, not hatred, but a profound, almost sad pity in the golden eyes of the being who had defeated him. Then, his world went black. As Kokobile's unconscious body slumped to the ground, a tremor ran through the very fabric of space. For a single, terrifying second, a crack appeared in the sky above them. It was not a crack of light or energy, but a fissure of pure, unadulterated nothing. No light escaped it, no sound came from it. It was a wound in reality itself. And from that wound, a wave of palpable silence washed over the battlefield. It was not the absence of sound. It was the absence of everything. The hum of magic, the thrum of life, the beating of their own hearts. For that 1 second, it all vanished, replaced by a chilling, soul-deep emptiness that promised utter annihilation. Then, as quickly as it came, the fissure sealed itself, and the feeling was gone. But the memory of it, the psychic scar it left on everyone present, would never fade. They had just looked into the abyss. And they had the terrifying certainty that something had been looking back. In the stunned silence of the aftermath, a flash of white light appeared. A figure with 12 golden wings descended, his power immense, but gentle. It was Michael, the leader of heaven. But he was too late. The battle was already over. The hero of the day floated gently back to the ground, his golden aura fading, leaving him once again as just a man in an orange jacket. He stood amidst the wreckage, surrounded by the stunned and awestruck members of 2 peerages, 2 shell-shocked exorcists, and a defeated fallen angel, and he looked up at the sky where the fissure had been, his expression grim. The game had changed. The real enemy had just shown its face. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Summit of Serpents. The aftermath of the battle was a study in stunned silence. The grounds of Kuo Academy were a ruin of craters and scorched earth, yet the school building itself stood untouched, a testament to the Sona's peerage's desperate defense. Kokobile's unconscious 4M was quickly bound in magical restraints by Graphia, who had appeared in a silent flash of silver light the moment the fighting had ceased. The members of the Grimoire and C3 peerages were tending to their minor injuries. But their eyes kept straying to the man in the center of it all. Naruto's golden aura had faded, the truth-seeking orbs melting back into his being as if they had never been. He was just a man in a tattered orange and black jacket again, but no one present would ever see him that way again. They had seen a glimpse of the power that had ended a war and saved a world, and it was a terrifying, beautiful, and utterly humbling sight. Before the quiet could be fully processed, the air shimmered with a gentle, golden light. A being of breathtaking beauty and immense, calming power descended from the heavens. He had 12 golden wings that seemed to be woven from pure sunlight, and his serene face held an expression of profound sorrow. It was the Archangel Michael, the acting leader of heaven. I have come too late, Michael said, his voice a melody of regret. His gaze swept over the devastation, lingered on the broken forms of Zenobia and Irina who were being tended to by Asia, and finally settled on Naruto. The Archangel's eyes widened slightly, not with fear, but with a deep, analytical awe. I have never felt a power like yours. It is not holy, nor is it profane. It feels alive, as if it is the very essence of the world itself. Naruto simply gave a slight nod in acknowledgement. He was trying to start a war. I stopped him. Just then, a crimson magic circle flared to life. And Sirzechs Lucifer stepped through, his usual charming smile completely absent. His eyes, a piercing turquoise, blazed with a cold fury as he took in the scene. He saw the unconscious Kokobile, the cratered battlefield, his sister standing safe and sound, and the otherworldly being standing beside her as if he were a natural part of the landscape. It seems my sister's new ally. Lee is even more capable than my intelligence suggested, Sirzechs said, his voice a low, dangerous calm. He looked at Michael. Your side allowed a Cadre-class traitor to run rampant, Michael. He near. Lee destroyed this town and revealed a truth that has shattered the faith of your followers. The blame for Kokobile's madness is a burden heaven will bear, Michael conceded with a heavy sigh. But his actions have thrown our fragile peace into jeopardy. This revelation, the death of my father, it changes everything. The three of them, a great Satan, an archangel, and a shinobi sage, stood in the center of the wreckage. A triumvirate of powers this world had never seen. It was clear to all of them that the old rules no longer applied. A meeting is required, Sirzechs declared, his gaze unwavering. Immediately, all three faction leaders, Azazel must be made to answer for his subordinate. I agree, Michael said. The world cannot afford for us to be divided now. Not after what we all just felt. He looked up at the sky. At the spot where the fissure of pure nothingness had appeared. That was not a power of any of our factions. It was something other. Then it's settled, Sirzechs announced. In 2 days' time, we will hold a summit. Here, at Kuo Academy. He looked at Naruto. This ground has been defended by a power that Kokobile could not overcome. It will serve as a fitten G symbol for the new era we must now forge. He didn't ask for permission. He stated it as a fact. An acknowledgement that Naruto was no longer just an ally to his sister, but a major player on the world stage. 2 days later, Kuo Academy was unrecognizable. A massive, multi-layered barrier shimmered over the entire school, a joint creation of the Grimoire, Citri, and Lucifer magical artisans. Ill knights in polished black armor stood silent guard at every corner. The Occult Research Club building had been designated the official meeting chamber. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with magic. Rias and Sona stood with their peerages, dressed in formal attire, their faces betraying the immense pressure of the occasion. Naruto, clad in a simple black shirt and pants Akino had procured for him, looked completely unfazed. He was leaning against the wall, observing the proceedings with a detached curiosity. To think, Rias murmured to him, her voice a low whisper. The leaders of the three great factions, meeting in our clubhouse. It's surreal. They're just people, Rias, Naruto replied quietly. People with a lot of power and old grudges. Don't let the fancy titles fool you. His simple, grounding words seemed to ease her nerves. She gave him a small, grateful smile. The first to arrive was Michael, accompanied by a stoic Irina, who had seemingly found a new resolve in serving the Archangel directly rather than a distant, abstract concept of God. Then came Sirzechs, with Graphia at his side as always. Finally, a third magic circle, a deep purple, materialized, and Azazel, the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels, stepped out. He looked less like a faction leader and more like a rock star, with spiky black hair, a dozen black wings, and a casual, almost lazy demeanor. His eyes, however, were sharp and missed nothing. They immediately locked onto Issei's boosted gear, and then onto Naruto. Well, Azazel said, a wide, intrigued grin spreading across his face. So you're the one who spanked my naughty little war hawk. And you must be the new Red Dragon Emperor. Fascinating. He sauntered into the room, completely ignoring the political gravity of the moment. The three leaders sat at a round table that had been placed in the center of the room. Their peerages and guards stood behind them. Naruto remained by the wall, a silent observer. The summit began with a predictable round of accusations and deflections. Sirzechs condemned Azazel for his lack of control over Kokobile. Azazel countered that Kokobile had gone rogue, and that the devils weren't exactly saints. Michael attempted to mediate, his gentle voice a calming influence in the rising storm of political rhetoric. They spoke of treaties, of reparations, of the political fallout from God's death. They were dividing up the world, drawing lines on a map, all while ignoring the chasm that had briefly opened in their sky. Finally, Naruto pushed himself off the wall. "You're all missing the point," he said. The room fell silent. The three most powerful leaders in their world turned to look at him. "You're arguing about who gets which piece of the ship," Naruto continued. "Walking slowly towards the table, while there's a hole in the hull and the ocean is pouring in." Kokubile wasn't just a warmonger. He was a nihilist. He said he wanted to bring about a beautiful, perfect silence. The stray devil that attacked Issei spoke of an age of silence. When Kokubile was defeated, a crack opened in reality, and a wave of nothing washed over us. Don't you see? Your war, your political games. That's just the appetizer. The main course is an enemy you don't even seem to realize is at your door. His words, spoken with the simple clarity of an outsider, cut through the layers of political posturing. The three leaders looked at each other, the old animosities in their eyes being replaced by a shared, dawning horror. "The primordial," Azazel whispered, his casual demeanor gone, replaced by a grim seriousness. "The legends speak of a force of entropy that existed before creation. A sentient void that the original gods and Satans fought to a standstill and sealed away. We always dismissed it as a myth, a creation story. It is no myth," Michael said, his face pale. "My father's last records spoke of it. He called it the Silent One. He believed his own presence, the sheer force of his creative will, was a key component of the seal. With him gone, the seal is weakening," Sirzechs finished, his face grim. Kokubile wasn't just trying to start a war to satisfy his own ego. He was trying to create enough chaos and death to shatter the seal completely. A heavy, terrifying silence descended upon the room. The political squabbles of the last hour seemed childish and insignificant in the face of an existential threat to all of reality. It was in that moment of profound silence that the attack came. It wasn't an explosion. It was a subtle shift in reality. A wave of magic washed over the academy, and everyone below the level of a faction leader was frozen in time. Rias, Sona, their peerages, they were all locked in place like statues. Only Naruto, Sirzechs, Michael, Azazel, and their immediate guards were unaffected. The space in the center of the room shimmered, and a young man in black armor with 4 white dragon wings appeared. It was Valley Lucifer, the descendant of the original Lucifer and the wielder of the divine dividing. "So sorry to interrupt," Valley said with a bored, arrogant drawl. "But my master, Ophis, was getting rather tired of all this talk of peace." "Valley," Azazel sighed, a look of paternal disappointment on his face. "Must you always make such a dramatic entrance? The Chaos Brigade has no interest in your new alliance," Valley stated. Ignoring him, his eyes, burning with a lust for battle, fixed on the three leaders. "We exist to create chaos. And I exist to find a worthy rival." Sirzechs and Michael rose to their feet, their power flaring. Azazel remained seated, but 12 lances of light materialized behind him. The battle was about to begin. But Naruto wasn't looking at Valley. His sage senses were screaming. The attack was too flashy, too direct. It was a feint. While all eyes were on the White Dragon Emperor, he felt it. A sliver of killing intent, so cold and so empty it was almost undetectable. It wasn't hot-blooded like Valley's. It was a chilling, calculated desire for annihilation. It was the same feeling he'd gotten from the hollow stray, the same energy that had seeped from the fissure in the sky. His eyes scanned the frozen figures. It wasn't coming from any of the younger devils. He looked to the guards, the high-ranking devils and angels standing behind their leaders. And then he saw it. Lord Glacia Labelas, one of the ancient devil elders who had been present at his summoning. The one who had sneered in the shadows, who had been the most vocal proponent of the Phoenix Union. His face was a mask of serene focus, his eyes were closed, and he was muttering under his breath, his hands weaving a complex spell that was almost invisible. It was a spell of pure unmaking, a sliver of the power of the Silent One, and it was aimed directly at the backs of the three distracted leaders. The vision Glacia Labelas had experienced during the summoning hadn't just scared him. It had converted him. He had seen the ultimate end and had chosen to be its harbinger rather than its victim. While the three faction leaders braced for Valley's assault, Naruto moved. He didn't use a flashy jutsu. He didn't cloak himself in golden fire. He simply took a step, crossing the entire room in an instant that was faster than thought. He appeared directly behind the ancient devil, his H, and gently clamping down on the elder's shoulder. "It's over," Naruto whispered. The flow of dark, silent magic sputtered and died. Lord Glacia Labilus's eyes snapped open, filled not with anger, but with a profound, soul-deep terror and a hint of relief. He had been stopped. The leaders, feeling the sudden dissipation of the assassination spell, spun around in shock. Valley, realizing his diversion had been foiled, simply smirked. "Well, that's no fun." With a flash of white light, he vanished, his mission to create a distraction complete. The time-stop spell collapsed, and the room was once again filled with the sounds of confused, disoriented devils and angels. Sirzechs stared at the trembling Lord Glacia Labilus, his face a mask of cold, betrayed fury. "You, after all the centuries your house has served, why?" The old devil crumpled to the floor, all the fight gone out of him. He began to laugh, a broken, pathetic sound. "You can't fight it, Lucifer," he sobbed. "I saw it. The beautiful, terrible, silent end. It is not a king to be served. It is a tide to be drowned in. It doesn't promise us power or glory. It promises an end to all this pointless noise. An end to pain, an end to fear, an end to everything. And its followers are already everywhere. In your court, in Michael's host, in Azazel's ranks. We are not traitors. We are the sane ones." His confession sent a wave of ice through the hearts of everyone present. The enemy wasn't just at the door. It was already inside the house. The summit concluded not with a treaty, but with a vow. An alliance born not of a desire for peace, but of a shared, primal fear of extinction. The leaders departed, their minds reeling with the knowledge that their own ranks were compromised, that a silent, creeping corruption was eating away at the foundations of their world. That night, the Occult Research Club was quiet. The peerages had withdrawn, leaving the central trio alone. Naruto, Rias, and Sona stood on the balcony, looking out at the grounds, now bathed in the soft glow of magical lights set up for security. "He stood in the same room as us when you were summoned," Rias said, her voice barely a whisper. She hugged herself, a shiver running through her that had nothing to do with the night air. "He was a serpent in our midst the entire time. His motivation was fear," Sona observed, her voice clinical but unable to hide her own unease. "That makes this enemy far more dangerous. They are not fighting for a cause, but surrendering to what they believe is an inevitability." Naruto remained silent, looking up at the sky. He had faced down gods, monsters, and men who wanted to rule the world. But this was different. How do you fight an enemy whose only goal is to make everything stop? Rias moved to stand beside him. The events of the day had stripped away the last of her noble pretense. She was just a young woman terrified for her friends, her family, her entire world. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. A moment later, Sona moved to his other side, her own hand gently resting on his arm. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. In that silent moment, standing together against a vast, unknowable darkness, the contract they had signed became irrelevant. This was no longer a political alliance. It was a partnership, forged in fire and tempered by the threat of a silent, all-consuming end. They were in this together, and whatever came next, they would face it as one. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Library of Lost Souls. Paranoia was a quiet, creeping poison. In the week that followed the disastrous summit, it seeped into every corner of the supernatural world. Sirzechs had initiated a discreet but ruthless internal investigation, and whispers of high-ranking officials from all three factions being quietly retired were a constant, chilling rumor. The Chaos Brigade was a known enemy, a collection of terrorists and malcontents. But this new threat, this cult of silence, was a cancer within. It had no face, no banner, and its only ideology was the promise of a peaceful end. The Occult Research Club building had transformed from a clubhouse into a fortress and a command center. Powerful new wards, a gift from Lord Cetri, shimmered visibly in the air. The combined peerages trained with a new, grim intensity, their mock battles. feeling less like practice and more like a desperate preparation for the inevitable. Yet, for all the activity, they were fundamentally on the defensive, waiting for the next blow to fall. Naruto hated waiting. He found Sona in the main club room, which now resembled a military briefing room. She was standing before a massive, magically projected map of the underworld, covered in notations and glowing runes. She hadn't slept in 2 days, a fact betrayed by the faint shadows under her eyes that even her stoic demeanor couldn't hide. "We're treating this like a rebellion," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Sona turned, her violet eyes focusing on him. "We're looking for traitors, plugging security holes, building bigger walls. We're trying to stop the symptoms, not cure the disease." "The disease is an ideology, Naruto," Sona countered, her tone crisp and logical. "We cannot fight a concept with swords and magic. Our only option is to contain the infection and root out those who have succumbed to it." "No," Naruto said, walking towards the map. "The disease is fear, and the cure for fear isn't walls. It's knowledge." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "We don't know what this, Silent One, is. We don't know where it came from, or how it was beaten before. We're fighting a shadow in the dark. I'm done fighting shadows. I want to turn on the lights." His words resonated with the part of her that was a scholar, a strategist who knew the value of intelligence above all else. The official histories, even the most classified ones in the Lucifer archives, refer to the primordial era only in myths and allegories. They speak of a formless chaos that was given order by the first beings. Any text that might have contained a more literal account was sealed away after the Great War to consolidate the New World Order. Sealed away where? Naruto pressed, sensing he was close to an answer. Sona hesitated, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "There is a place. A legend, mostly. The Abazeth Library. It was named for a mythical devil of knowledge who was said to possess one of the keys to King Solomon's wisdom. The library supposedly predates the Lucifer regime. It was a repository for all knowledge, especially that which was deemed heretical or dangerous to the established powers. They say the original Satans couldn't destroy it, so they simply sealed it, hid it, and erased its location from every map. But not from every record," Naruto surmised. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Sona's lips. "My family has always been more interested in information than in glory. An obscure Cetri archivist in my great-grandfather's time made a note of a series of celestial coordinates that had no corresponding astronomical body. He theorized it was the location. Then that's where we're going," Naruto stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Naruto, it's not that simple," Rias said, entering the room with Akeno and Issei in tow. She had clearly overheard their conversation. "If the legends are true, the library is in the Sea of Remnants, a decaying dimensional space filled with the debris of forgotten realms. It's protected by conceptual locks and ancient guardians. No one has entered it and returned in millennia." "Then we'll be the first," Naruto replied simply. He looked at the concerned faces around him. "We can sit here and wait for the enemy to pick us off one by one from the inside, or we can go find the weapon they're so afraid of us having, the truth." There was no real debate. His logic was unassailable, his resolve infectious. A message was sent to Sirzechs, who, after a long and pregnant pause, sent back a 2-word reply: "Be careful." It was all the permission they needed. The Sea of Remnants was not a sea of water. It was an endless, silent expanse of gray mist, punctuated by the ghostly shapes of things that had ceased to be. Shattered continents drifted aimlessly, the ruins of impossible cities crumbling in slow motion. Giant, fossilized skeletons of creatures that defied imagination floated past like derelict ships. There was no up or down, no sun, only a pervasive, melancholy twilight. They traveled in a specialized transport vessel provided by the Cetri family, a sleek, black craft that cut through the mists like a silent blade. Naruto, Rias, Sona, and their entire peerages were on board. They were a single, cohesive unit now, their old rivalries a distant memory. "The coordinates are stable," Tsubaki Shinra, Sona's queen, reported from the helm. "We should be approaching the location now." As if on cue, a shape began to coalesce out of the mist ahead. It was a perfect, obsidian sphere, hundreds of miles in diameter, floating in the void. It absorbed all light, a hole in the fabric of the desolate reality around them. There were no visible doors, no markings, nothing to indicate what it was. That's it, Sona whispered in awe. The library of Abazeth. The transport ship drew closer. But a palpable pressure in the void stopped them a few miles out. It wasn't a physical barrier, but a conceptual one. A wall of pure intent. State your purpose, a voice echoed, not through the air, but in their minds. It was ancient, genderless, and utterly dispassionate. Only those who seek knowledge to preserve may enter. Those who seek it to control, to destroy, or to satisfy their own vanity shall be unmade. A wave of psychic force washed over the ship. Everyone tensed, feeling their minds being scanned, their deepest intentions laid bare. It was a terrifyingly intimate violation. Then, the voice focused. You. It was directed solely at Naruto. Your soul is loud. It burns with the fires of 1,000 suns, yet its core is tranquil. You have held DxD power to unmake your own world and chose not to. You are unexpected. What do you seek? Naruto stepped to the front of the vessel's viewport, looking out at the black sphere. He didn't speak aloud, but projected his thoughts with the calm clarity of a sage. I seek to understand my enemy, he sent. Not to control him, not even to destroy him, but to understand what he is, so I can protect those who cannot protect themselves. I seek knowledge to preserve life. For a long moment, the void was silent. Then, the voice spoke one final time. Your purpose is acceptable. A thin, hairline crack of silver light appeared on the surface of the obsidian sphere. It widened, splitting the massive object in two, revealing a glowing, ethereal interior. It was an invitation. The ship docked, and they stepped out into the library. The interior was a place outside of physics. Vast, spiraling staircases made of crystallized light connected floating platforms, each holding countless shelves that stretched into an infinite, star-dusted darkness. There were no books of paper or parchment. Tomes were carved into floating monoliths of stone, woven into tapestries of shimmering light, or contained within pulsating, crystalline spheres. The air was still and silent, thick with the weight of forgotten ages. Spread out, Sona commanded, her voice a hushed whisper. Look for anything related to primordial beings, creation myths, or celestial seals. Do not touch anything unless you are certain it is safe. The group split up, moving through the impossible architecture with a reverent caution. Hiba found a weapon rack containing swords that sang a soft, sorrowful tune. Kaneko was drawn to a section where the history of the Nekomata was written on sheets of petrified wood. Naruto, however, didn't search. He closed his eyes, extending his sage senses. He wasn't looking for a book. He was listening for a story. He filtered out the billions of pieces of dormant information, searching for an echo, a resonance that felt familiar. And then he found it. A faint, cold whisper that felt like the dying energy of the hollow stray, like the chilling edge of the fissure in the sky. He followed the sensation to a secluded, lower level of the library. In the center of a circular platform, floating on a simple stone pedestal, was a single codex. It was bound in a material that looked like solidified shadow, and it was locked with a clasp that seemed to have no keyhole. As he approached, he could feel a profound aura of sorrow and despair radiating from it. This was not a history book, it was a final testament. Rias and Sona, having noticed his departure, found him there. Naruto, what is it? Rias asked. This is it, he said, his eyes fixed on the codex. This is what we came for. He reached out to touch the clasp. As his fingers made contact, the lock dissolved into smoke. The book fell open. The pages were blank. What? Sona murmured, stepping closer. There's nothing here. The story isn't written in words, Naruto said. He placed his palm flat on the open page. It was written in memory. He closed his eyes and poured his sage chakra into the codex. It was not an act of force, but of communion. He was asking the book to share its story. The library around them vanished. They were no longer in a building, but floating in a vast, colorless void before the dawn of creation. And they were not alone. A consciousness, ancient and weary, the lingering will of the codex's author, began to show them what it had witnessed. They saw flashes of the primordial war. It was not a battle of armies, but of concepts. They saw beings of pure creation, the original Lucifer, his silver wings blazing not with ambition but with the light of a new star. The first dragon kings, so vast their scales were the size of mountains. And other gods, beings of life, death, time, and fate, standing united. Their enemy was not a creature or a commander. It was a slow, creeping, silent wave of uncreation. A formless, sentient oblivion that sought not to conquer, but to erase. They saw it consume entire galaxies, not with fire, but by simply convincing them to cease existing. They felt the disparity on of the creators as they realized they could not destroy a concept. They could not kill nothing. And so, they devised their final, desperate gambit. The vision shifted. They saw the coalition of God's and primordial beings pouring their essences, their very concepts, into a single, great act. They were weaving a cage not of magic or matter, but of meaning. The Great Seal. It was powered by the universe's noise, the chaotic, vibrant, and endless energy generated by life, by belief, by emotion, by love, by conflict, by the very act of existence. As long as the universe was loud with life, the seal would hold the silence at bay. Then, the final, terrifying revelation came. A prophecy, written in the fading will of the last creator. They saw the Codex's last memory, a warning. The seal is not eternal. It is a dam built against an infinite ocean. It is weakened by the fading of great lights. Should enough sources of conceptual noise, gods, belief systems, fundamental forces, be extinguished in a short span of time, a convergence of nothingness will occur. The dam will not break. It will be rendered meaningless. The silence will not invade. It will simply be. The vision showed them a single, brilliant star, a symbol of the biblical God, flickering and dying. And they saw the first, catastrophic crack spread across the surface of the conceptual dam. The vision ended. Naruto, Rias, and Sona stumbled back, gasping. The psychic weight of the revelation settling on them like a physical shroud. They were back in the library, but the silent, dusty air now felt like the suffocating pressure of a tomb. They hadn't just discovered the history of a forgotten war. They had been handed the blueprint for their own extinction. This wasn't a fight they could win with power or strategy. It was a race against entropy itself. Rias looked at Naruto, her eyes wide with a terror that went beyond anything she had ever felt. She saw the same ancient weariness in his eyes that she had glimpsed once before. The burden of a man who had been forced to carry the fate of the world on his shoulders. Sona, for the first time in her life, was at a complete loss. Her tactical mind could find no purchase on an enemy that could not be fought. Only delayed. Naruto looked down at his hands, then at the two young women beside him. He felt the familiar weight of a world-ending responsibility settle upon him. But this time, he wasn't alone. He wasn't the outcast Jinchuriki fighting to be acknowledged. He reached out, and his hands found theirs. Rias's grip was tight, desperate. Sona's was hesitant at first, then firm. A silent pledge of solidarity. So, Naruto said, his voice quiet but steady, a single point of defiant noise in the vast, silent library. That's the enemy. He squeezed their hands. Now we know. Now we can fight. They stood there for a long moment, three disparate beings from different worlds, bound by a shared, impossible purpose. They were no longer just allies or partners. They were the first line of defense against the end of everything. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Asgardian Gambit. The knowledge they had brought back from the Abazeth library did not bring them relief. It settled over the inhabitants of the occult research club like a funeral shroud. The enemy had a name, a history, and a purpose, and that purpose was so vast and absolute that it dwarfed every conflict they had ever known. They weren't fighting for territory or power, they were fighting for the right of reality to exist. This new, grim understanding forged them into something sharper. The easy camaraderie was still there, but it was now underpinned by a core of hardened steel. Training sessions, once a matter of improving individual skills, became exercises in absolute synergy. Rias learned to weave her destructive power into the intricate ice formations Sona created, turning defensive walls into explosive traps. Issei, under Naruto's guidance, discovered how to use his boost ability in short, controlled bursts to augment his allies' magic instead of just firing off his dragon shot. They were becoming a single, multifaceted weapon, and Naruto was the hand that wielded it. He was in the middle of a sparring session with Kiba and Zenobia, the latter having unofficially joined the group after the Kokobile incident, her faith in the church shattered but her warrior's spirit intact. When the air itself seemed to bow in reverence, a golden magic circle, far more complex and powerful than even Sirzechs's, materialized on the lawn. Odin, the All-Father of the Norse pantheon, stepped through. He was not the regal, armored king of human myth. He looked like a weary old traveler, with a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, a simple cloak over his broad shoulders, and a single, high-seeing blue eye that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. He was flanked by a silver-haired Valkyrie whose beauty was as sharp and dangerous as the spear she carried. A potent collection of youngsters, Odin's voice rumbled, deep and ancient as the mountains of his realm. And one very loud, very bright soul. His single eye fixed on Naruto, a flicker of something akin to recognition in its depths. Sirzechs Lucifer told me I would find you here. He said you were the only one who might understand. Rias and Sona immediately stepped forward, assuming their roles as hostesses and leaders. All-Father Odin, Rias said, bowing respectfully, we are honored by your presence, but your unannounced arrival is surprising. These are not times for formal announcements, little Grimoire, Odin said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled youths. Ragnarok has begun, not the glorious, cyclical battle of prophecy, but a perversion. An end for the sake of an end. He looked back at Naruto. My son, Loki, has fallen into madness. He speaks of a true freedom, in perfect silence. He has unbound Fenrir, allied himself with the frost giants, and aims not to usher in a new age for Asgard, but to erase it from existence. He has become an apostle of the void. The words struck the group with the force of a physical blow. The creeping corruption had spread beyond the three factions. It had taken root in another pantheon, in the heart of one of its most powerful gods. Loki has always been a creature of chaos, the Valkyrie, Rosweiss, added, her voice tight with anger and grief. But this is different. His magic is hollow. It feels like the silence between heartbeats. He is using the mechanisms of Ragnarok to weaken the very fabric of our reality, to create a sacrifice large enough to tear a hole in the Great Seal. Why come to us? Sona asked, her mind already calculating the immense political and strategic implications of getting involved in a divine civil war. Odin's eye focused on Naruto again. Because you have faced this power. You have stood against the silence and made it retreat. I have spent a century of my power merely scrying for a way to counter Loki's new philosophy, and all I saw was your victory over the fallen angel. I do not ask the devil factions for aid. I do not ask for an army. He took a step forward, his old, weary frame radiating a desperate plea. I ask you, Naruto Uzumaki, to help me save my son from himself, and my world from utter annihilation. It wasn't a request for a political alliance. It was a father's plea. Naruto looked at the old god, and in his weary eye, he saw the same pain he had seen in the third Hokage, in Jiraiya, in his own father. The pain of watching someone you love walk a path of self-destruction. We'll help, Naruto said, his decision instantaneous. He looked at Rias and Sona, and saw in their eyes not hesitation, but a shared, grim resolve. They were all in this together. The Bifrost was not a bridge of rainbow light, but a screaming vortex of raw, untamed energy that tore a temporary path through the dimensional gap. Traveling through it felt like being unmade and reassembled 1,000 times a second. They emerged on the plains of Vigrid, the prophesied final battlefield of the Norse gods, and the sight was one of beautiful desolation. The sky above Asgard was a bruised purple, shot through with veins of sickly green light. In the distance, the golden halls of Valhalla burned, not with cleansing fire, but with a cold, black flame that seemed to consume the light itself. The air was filled with the sounds of battle, the roar of giants, the howling of monstrous wolves, and the clash of steel, but underneath it all was a creeping, unnatural quiet. Odin led them to a command post on a fortified ridge, where the last of the Einherjar, the valiant souls of dead warriors, fought alongside the remaining Aesir gods. The All-Father looked out at the battle, his face a mask of sorrow. He has twisted them, corrupted them. The Jotun do not fight for conquest. They fight to die, to feed the silence with their passing. A new figure approached, a man of immense size and power, with fiery red hair and a thunderous expression. Thor, the god of thunder, his hammer Mjolnir crackling with contained lightning. Father, Fenrir has broken through the eastern flank. He is making for Yggdrasil itself. If he gnaws the roots of the world tree, all 9 realms will unravel. We will hold the line, Odin declared, but his voice lacked conviction. He turned to Naruto and the others. I must lead the final defense of Valhalla. Thor must face the world serpent. But Fenrir, the beast is a force of nature. An echo of the old world's destruction. We'll handle the wolf, Naruto said calmly. You fight your battles. We'll fight ours. Thor looked at the group of devils and the strange human with skepticism, but he saw the unshakable confidence in Naruto's eyes and the look of desperate faith on his father's face. He gave a curt nod and hefted his hammer. May your arms be strong. As the Norse gods departed for their own fronts, Naruto turned to his own small army. All right, listen up. He was no longer the easygoing observer. He was a cage in his element. This is not about winning a war. It's about surgical strikes. Rias, Sona, you are joint commanders. Your peerages are one unit. Your objective is to stop the advance of the giants and Loki's corrupted forces. Use your mobility, use your magic, control the battlefield. Do not get bogged down in a battle of attrition. Your goal is to create a path for me. Rias and Sona nodded, their faces grim and focused. They had drilled for this. They moved off, shouting commands, their peerages falling into seamless formations around them. It was a symphony of controlled power. Devils moving with a discipline that would have made a military general weep. Issei, Naruto said, turning to the boy. You're with me, right? Issei said, slamming his gauntleted fist into his palm. Xenovia, Kiba, you're our vanguard. Clear a path to the biggest, ugliest dog you've ever seen. The 2 knights grinned, their swords already drawn. They shot off, a blur of silver and blue, cutting a swath through the corrupted warriors. Naruto and Issei followed in their wake. Fenrir was not hard to find. The great wolf, son of Loki, was a beast of pure, primal destruction, its fur the color of shadow. Its eyes burning with a cold, nihilistic hunger. It was tearing through a legion of Einherjar, its massive jaws snapping men in half, its claws carving canyons in the earth. That, Issei breathed, his bravado faltering for a second, is a big dog. Just a puppy, Naruto replied, his expression unreadable. Boost. Ddrake's voice roared from Issei's gauntlet. Wait for my signal, Issei. I need one perfect shot. Don't waste your energy until then. Naruto shot forward, a blur of orange. He wasn't aiming for the wolf. He was running up its massive, thrashing leg. Fenrir roared, trying to shake him off, but Naruto moved with the preternatural grace of a sage, his feet clinging to the beast's shadowy fur. He ran up its spine, dodging snapping ethereal jaws that erupted from its back. A manifestation of Loki's hollow magic. He reached the wolf's head and leapt, landing squarely on its snout between its burning eyes. He formed a Rasengan in his palm, not a normal one, but one infused with the raw, life-affirming energy of nature itself. He slammed it down. The explosion of sage energy didn't wound the beast in a conventional way. It was an attack, on the corrupting magic that fueled it. Fenrir howled, a sound of pain and confusion, shaking its head violently, trying to dislodge the burning, living energy searing its soul. Now, Issei, Naruto roared, leaping clear. On the ground, Issei had been pouring every ounce of his will, every scrap of his desire to protect his friends, into the boosted gear. Boost, 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 boost. The crimson aura around him was so dense it was nearly solid. Welsh dragon. Balance breaker. Crimson armor exploded into existence around him, encasing him in the form of a majestic dragon. He aimed, his mind clear. His target locked. The cannon on his back glowed with an almost white-hot intensity. Dragon shot. A beam of energy the size of a freight train erupted from his armor. It was a pure, focused expression of draconic power, and it struck the staggered Fenrir directly in the chest. The great wolf was lifted from its feet, its massive body sent flying backwards for miles before it crashed into a mountain. Its form dissolving into shadows, temporarily banished back to the dimension it had been unbound from. Issei collapsed to one knee, the armor shattering away, panting but triumphant. He had just taken a god-level beast out of the fight. Naruto landed beside him, clapping him on the shoulder. Good work. Now catch your breath. The real fight is about to start. He looked up towards the peak of the highest, most jagged mountain. There, silhouetted against the bruised sky, stood a single figure. Loki, you have ruined my pet's fun. Loki's voice drifted down, laced with a theatrical disappointment. No matter. His purpose was served. He created enough beautiful, resonant despair to power my final act. He gestured, and the very ground around them began to change. The souls of the dead, both giant and Einherjar, were pulled from their bodies, screaming as they were woven into a horrifying tapestry of despair. It was a ritual, and the battle had just been the fuel for it. I'm going alone, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument. This isn't a fight about power. It's a conversation. He vanished in a flicker of yellow light, reappearing on the mountain peak opposite the god of mischief. Loki was handsome, with long black hair and emerald eyes that held a chilling mix of amusement and profound, soul-deep exhaustion. So, the anathema comes to lecture me. Will you speak to me of hope, of the future, of the bonds of friendship? Spare me the tired sermon. No, Naruto said, his expression calm. I came to ask you why. The simple quest. Ion seemed to disarm Loki more than any threat. Why? He scoffed. Look at this. A pre-written tragedy. We are all just actors in a play we never auditioned for, speaking lines we did not write, marching towards a predictable, bloody end. Only to have the curtain rise and the whole miserable play begin again. I am not destroying the world. I am liberating it from the tyranny of its own story. You call this freedom? Naruto asked, gesturing to the screaming souls below. Ending the story isn't freedom. It's just giving up before you get to write your own ending. I was never allowed to write my own ending. Loki roared, his composure finally cracking. I am the god of mischief, the father of lies, the villain of the peace. It is my destiny to bring about Ragnarok. I don't want this destiny. So I will unmake it. The Silent One does not offer me power. It offers me a choice. The one choice I was never given. The choice for it all to simply stop. He raised his hands, and the power he channeled was not Asgardian. It was the cold, unmaking energy of the void, a sphere of perfect blackness forming between his palms. I sought it out. I invited it in. I am not its pawn. I am its prophet, and I will grant this entire, pointless universe the peace it is too cowardly to seek for itself. I get it, Naruto said softly, and the honesty in his voice made Loki pause again. I was a monster, too. A demon fox in a cage. My destiny was to be a weapon, to be hated and feared. Everyone knew my story before I even learned to read. So I decided to write a different one. Words. Loki spat. Your story ends the same as mine. In blood and death. Maybe, Naruto conceded. But it'll be my story. And it'll be a noisy one. It'll be full of ramen, and laughter, and the annoying sound of my friends shouting my name. That noise. That's what you're really afraid of, isn't it? The silence you want isn't peace. It's loneliness. He took a step forward, his own golden aura flaring to life. A stark contrast to the devouring emptiness of Loki's magic. I won't let you drag this world into your own private silence, Loki. The ideological battle was over. The physical one began. Loki unleashed the void, and Naruto met it with the sun of his own life force. The mountaintop became a battleground of existence versus oblivion, a clash of wills so potent it made the grand battle below seem like a scuffle between children. The fate of Asgard, and perhaps all the realms, was being decided not by armies, but by two souls who had been handed a destiny they never asked for, and the choice they each made in the face of it. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Unraveling. The mountaintop was a maelstrom of conflicting realities. Loki, the self-proclaimed prophet of the void, unleashed a torrent of palpable nothingness. It was not darkness, which is merely the absence of light, but an active, hungry anti-existence that sought to unwrite the very air it passed through. Rocks and earth touched by the energy didn't shatter. They simply ceased to be, leaving behind smooth, featureless surfaces. Against this tide of oblivion stood a single, defiant sun. Naruto's Six Paths Sage Mode was more than just a power-up. It was a fundamental statement of existence. His golden aura did not block the void, it refuted it. Where the silence sought to erase, his energy affirmed. It was the roar of life against the whisper of the end. Loki threw lances of solidified emptiness. Naruto countered with truth-seeking orbs that moved not to intercept, but to reinforce the reality the lances sought to negate. It was a battle fought on a conceptual level, a dizzying display that the onlookers below could only perceive as flashes of gold and patches of sky that seemed to vanish and reappear. "You cannot win," Loki screamed, his voice raw with a zealot's conviction. "You are one man, one noisy, insignificant life. My God is the inevitable tide that will wash away all the castles of sand you hold so dear." "Maybe," Naruto called back, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "But I'm not fighting alone." Instead of launching another attack, he brought his hands together in a simple seal. It was not a jutsu of destruction. It was one of connection. Sage art. All worlds communion. He pushed his consciousness out, not as an attack, but as an invitation. He bypassed Loki's defenses, not by breaking them, but by simply ignoring them. He reached directly for the god's soul, for the lonely, terrified child trapped beneath a destiny he despised. Loki's world fractured. He was no longer on a mountaintop in Asgard. He was standing on a swing set in a sun-drenched park, watching other children play. He was sitting alone in a grand hall, his brother Thor being celebrated while he was watched with suspicion. He felt the sting of 1,000 tiny rejections, the weight of a role he was forced to play, the crushing loneliness of being the necessary villain. Then, the vision shifted. He was in a small, bustling ramen stand. A gruff old man with a scarred face set a steaming bowl in front of him. A younger, boisterous version of the Golden Warrior opposite him grinned, his face smeared with broth. "Come on, Loki, you gotta try it. It's the food of the gods." The warmth of the bowl, the savory smell, the simple, uncomplicated joy of a shared meal, it was an experience so alien and yet so profoundly desirable that it made his soul ache. The scene changed again. He was on a training field, sparring with a black-haired rival whose arrogance was matched only by his skill. Their fists and powers clashed. But underneath the blows was a current of respect, of acknowledgement. It wasn't a battle of good versus evil, it was a conversation between equals, each one making the other stronger. Finally, he stood on a balcony. The night air cool and calm. 2 women stood with him, a crimson-haired heiress and a raven-haired strategist. They didn't speak. They simply stood beside him, their presence a silent bulwark against the darkness. A shared warmth that pushed back the cold. He felt the weight of their trust, the comfort of their companionship. The visions faded. They were back on the mountaintop. Loki was on his knees, gasping. Tears streaming from his emerald eyes. The sphere of oblivion in his hands had dissipated. He wasn't looking at Naruto as an enemy, but as someone who had shown him a world he never knew was possible. That noise, Loki whispered, his voice broken. "It's beautiful." Naruto's golden aura softened. He lowered his hands. "It's called life, Loki. It's messy and loud and it hurts. But it's better than the quiet." A horrifying, shuddering sob escaped the god of mischief. It was the sound of a lifetime of pain, of a philosophy built on despair, shattering all at once. "What have I done?" he cried, looking down at the battlefield below. The souls of the dead were still being drawn into his half-finished ritual, a swirling vortex of despair that was pulsing with a sickly, silent energy. "I can't stop it. The ritual, it took on a life of its own. It's not drawing power from me anymore. It's drawing power from them." He pointed a trembling finger towards the sky. Naruto looked up. The sky was not just dark. It was blank. The bruised purple and green hues of Asgard's twilight were gone, replaced by a flat, featureless gray. A crack appeared in that blankness. Then another, and another. It was the sound of a universe-sized sheet of glass shattering in slow motion. Below, the battle had ceased. The combined Grimoire and Sitri peerages, the Einherjar, the remaining Aesir, they all stared upwards in horror. A great groaning sound echoed across the plains, the sound of a fundamental law of reality giving way. The Great Seal, weakened by the death of God, and now hammered by the focused despair of a divine civil war, was not just cracking. It was breaking apart. The convergence of nothingness was here. Rias felt her power of destruction flicker and die in her hands. Sona's magical projections fizzled into static. Issei's boosted gear went silent, the familiar voice of DxD suddenly gone. What's happening? He yelled, his voice sounding thin and distant. The unraveling began. The color started to drain from the world, the vibrant greens of the plains and the gold of Valhalla fading into a monochrome gray. The sounds of battle were replaced by a creeping, muffling silence that swallowed all noise. It wasn't just quiet, it was the active negation of sound. Then came the worst part. Akeno looked at Kiba, and for a fleeting moment, she couldn't remember his name. Saji momentarily forgot the face of his student council president. Memories, identities, the very concepts that made them who they were, began to fray at the edges. This was the manifestation of the Silent One. It wasn't an invading army or a roaring monster. It was a cosmic disease, a creeping entropy that was calmly and dispassionately erasing existence itself. Odin, his face ashen, stumbled back. The all-ending, he whispered in horrified reverence. It has come. They were helpless. Utterly, completely helpless. Their most powerful attacks, their most intricate spells, were meaningless. They couldn't fight a change in the laws of reality. They were nothing more than words on a page, watching as the book they were written in was slowly, inexorably, set on fire. On the mountaintop, Naruto felt it too. The natural energy of the world was being smothered, choked out by the creeping silence. Kit, Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, and for the first time, Naruto heard genuine fear in the ancient-tailed beast's tone. It's not attacking. It's just replacing. All of this, it's being overridden by nothing. There's nothing to fight. Naruto looked down at his own hands, watching as the golden aura around them flickered, threatening to go out. He looked at the faces of his friends below, their expressions of terror, their identities beginning to fray. Rias, Sona, Issei, all of them. He had promised them freedom. He had promised to protect them. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. The old seal was made of the universe's noise. It had been shattered. A new one had to be forged. A new anchor, a new pillar had to be planted to hold back the tide. And it had to be a source of noise so powerful, so defiant, so fundamentally alive that the silence could not override it. He floated down from the mountain, a lone point of gold in a world that was rapidly turning to gray. He landed gently in the center of his friends, who gathered around him, their fear palpable. It can't be fought, Naruto said, his voice quiet but clear, a small island of sound in the encroaching silence. But it can be held back. The old seal is gone. A new one needs to be made. How? Rias asked, her voice trembling as she reached for his hand, her touch a desperate anchor in the unraveling. He looked at her, and his eyes were filled with a profound sorrow and an even more profound love. With a life, he said softly. With a soul so loud it can't be silenced. The realization dawned on them, horrific and absolute. No, Sona stated, her voice cracking, her clinical composure shattered. There has to be another way. A strategic retreat, a way to. There's nowhere to retreat to, Naruto interrupted gently. This is happening everywhere. This is the end, unless we give it a new beginning. Then I'll do it, Issei shouted, stepping forward, his face a mask of desperate resolve. His crimson armor flickered into existence for a single, defiant second before fading again. The boosted gear can amplify anything. Power, will, maybe it can amplify existence itself. Let me try. Let me be the one. Naruto looked at the boy he had mentored, the perverted goofball who had become a true hero willing to die for the world. He saw himself, so many years ago, willing to throw his life away to protect his friends. He smiled, a genuine, proud smile, and reached out, ruffling Issei's hair. You've become a great man, Issei Hyodo, Naruto said. That's why you have to live. You have to be one of the noisy ones who keeps the rest of the world worth saving. He turned to Rias and Sona. The world was fading fast, the edges of their forms starting to blur. He reached out, cupping their faces in his hands. He looked into Rias's terrified blue-green eyes, and then into Sona's brilliant, tear-filled violet ones. I kept my promise, he whispered. You're free. Both of you, now live, have complicated, messy, loud lives. Argue about stupid things. Fall in love. Build a future. Just don't ever be quiet. He leaned in and pressed a gentle, final kiss to Rias's forehead and then to Sona's. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of farewell. A final, silent tr. Answerance of all the things he had never had the chance to say. He stepped back, and his body erupted in a pillar of golden light that pushed back the gray, a defiant sunrise against the end of the world. The spectral forms of the nine-tailed beasts appeared around him, not as monsters, but as vast, swirling rivers of pure chakra. "Kurama," he said, his voice echoing with the power of a god. "Are you ready? I've followed you this far, you idiot kid," the fox's voice roared, a sound of grief and unwavering loyalty. "Let's show this void what a real monster looks like." Naruto ascended into the sky, a living star of pure creation. He did not attack the silence. He did not fight the unraveling. He began to sing, not with his voice, but with his soul. It was a song of life itself, a symphony of every ramen bowl he'd ever eaten. Every punch he'd ever thrown, every bond he'd ever forged. He became a living nexus of noise, a paradox of infinite life holding back the tide of infinite nothingness. The gray stopped advancing. The unraveling halted. The world, scarred and faded, was held in stasis. Down below, Rias and Sona fell to their knees, reaching a hand up towards the golden sun that had once been their friend. Their protector, their hope. They could feel him, not as a man, but as a concept, a warm, defiant presence holding their broken reality together. The battle was over. The apocalypse had been stopped. The world was saved, but the hero was gone, transformed into the eternal, silent guardian who had sacrificed his everything to give them a future. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. A New Genesis. The world was not silent. It was worse. It was muted. The gray landscape of Asgard was a photograph drained of its color, the memory of a world rather than the world itself. The roar of battle, the clash of steel, the screams of the dying, all had been replaced by a muffling, oppressive quiet that absorbed all sound. Above them, where a bruised and chaotic sky had been, there was only a golden sun. A lone point of defiant warmth in the vast, monochrome emptiness. It did not radiate light so much as it projected existence. It was Naruto. Rias Grimori was on her knees, her hand outstretched towards that distant, impossible star. The tears that streamed down her face were gray, her crimson hair a faded shade of ash. The power of destruction, the very essence of her being, was a cold, dead weight within her. He was gone. He had saved them, saved everything, and the cost had been himself. The freedom he had given her felt like the heaviest shackle she had ever worn. Beside her, Sona Citri stood rigid, her glasses askew, her analytical mind shattered into a million useless fragments. Strategy had no meaning here. Logic had failed. There were no moves left on the board. She had calculated every risk, every variable, except for the one variable she had come to rely on most. The sheer, indomitable will of the man who had promised them a future. And in his final act, He had fulfilled that promise by removing himself from it. The grief was so absolute, so illogical, that her mind simply refused to process it, leaving only a cold, hollow ache. Issei, his dragon armor gone, punched the faded ground. The sound a dull, unsatisfying thud. Rage and sorrow warred within him, a pointless, bitter conflict. The man who had taught him what true strength was, who had shown him the path of a protector, had made the ultimate sacrifice, and he had been helpless to stop it. Even the gods were humbled. Odin stood leaning heavily on his spear, his single eye fixed on the golden nexus, a look of profound, sorrowful awe on his ancient face. This was a power beyond pantheons, a sacrifice beyond the scope of any prophecy. It was Rias who moved first. A memory, sharp and clear, cut through the gray fog of her grief. His voice, on the balcony of the clubhouse, calm and gentle. Just, don't ever be quiet. It was a command, a final wish, and she was failing it. Her grief was a silent, internal thing. It was a surrender. He hadn't surrendered. He had become the battlefield. She stood up, her legs trembling. She looked at the golden sun, at the new, living seal. It was holding the silence at bay. A dam of pure life against an ocean of nothing. But the world was still broken, held in this gray stasis. A dam holds back a flood. It doesn't make the wasteland bloom again. He's not a dam. A thought sparked in her mind, a tiny flicker of her Grimori intuition. He's a nexus. He's a conduit. Sona, she said, her voice a raw, cracked whisper in the muted air. Sona turned, her violet eyes lost and empty. He told us to be loud. Sona stared at her, uncomprehending. Rias, he didn't just fight for us, Rias insisted, a frantic energy beginning to burn away the edges of her despair. She grabbed Sona's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. He fought with us. The seal isn't just him. It can't be. One man, even him, can't hold back the end of everything forever. He's the anchor, but we have to be the chains. The logic, however desperate, began to penetrate Sona's grief-stricken mind. An anchor needs something to hold onto. A nexus needs something to channel. Naruto's power was a song of life. But it was a solo. A choir is always louder. What do we do? Sona asked, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual command. Rias didn't have a plan. She only had an instinct. She closed her eyes, ignoring the faded world around her, and focused on one thing, the memory of him. Not the golden god in the sky, but the man. The goofy grin after a bowl of ramen. The weary sadness in his eyes when he spoke of war. The gentle warmth of his hand. The fierce pride in his voice when he had called Issei a hero. The quiet, final kiss on her forehead. She gathered all of it, her gratitude, her admiration, her burgeoning, unspoken love, and she pushed it outwards. Not with magic, for her magic was dead. She pushed it with her soul. It was a clumsy, desperate broadcast, a single, defiant note of crimson noise into the gray silence, aimed at the golden sun. Sona understood. She did the same. She let go of her strategies, her calculations, her rigid control. She focused on her respect for him. A respect so profound it bordered on reverence. She thought of his unconventional wisdom, his flawless leadership, his ability to heal a broken mind with a few simple words. She remembered the quiet moment on the summit balcony, the feeling of his presence beside her, a silent promise that she was no longer alone in her burdens. She channeled all of it, her logic, her loyalty, our deeply buried affection, into a stream of pure, indigo intent. One by one, the others joined in. Issei pushed his unwavering loyalty, his draconic spirit, his promise to be a man Rias could be proud of. Akeno sent her mischievous gratitude. Kiba, his knightly vow. Kaneko, a simple, powerful feeling of belonging he had given her. Even the gods, Odin, Thor, and the changed Loki, sent their own ancient, powerful reverence towards the being who had saved them. It was a chorus of souls. A symphony of noise. In the heart of the golden seal, Naruto felt it. He was a pillar, a vast and lonely consciousness holding back the tide. He had been prepared to do so for eternity. But now, their feelings, their noise, washed over him. It was not a weight, but a support. It was fuel. It was purpose. See, Kit, Kurama's voice rumbled, not from within him, but as him, a fundamental part of the seal. You never do anything alone. He had become a dam to hold back the void. But with their energy, their love, their life, he could do more. He could become a heart. He could pump life back into the world. He stopped just holding the silence back. He began to draw it in. The terrifying power of the Silent One, the ultimate force of entropy, was pulled into the nexus of his being. It was met there by the life force of the nine-tailed beasts, by his own indomitable will, and now, by the chorus of souls from the world below. He didn't destroy the void. He gave it a counterpart. He created a perfect, self-sustaining balance. Oblivion was balanced by existence. Silence was balanced by noise. The ultimate weapon of destruction became the ultimate shield of creation, a fundamental force of universal equilibrium. The effect was instantaneous. From the golden sun in the sky, a wave of warmth and color washed over Asgard. The gray plains blushed with green. The black, hollow flames guttering Valhalla's halls became bright, golden fire once more. The sky above them swirled with the vibrant purples and blues of a healthy Asgardian twilight. Sound rushed back in, the whistling of the wind, the distant cry of a raven, the sound of their own ragged, joyous breaths. Rias's hair was a brilliant, fiery crimson again. The power of destruction hummed in her veins, warm and familiar. Sona's peerage was bathed in a gentle blue aura, their magical energies restored and singing. Partner, I can feel you again. DxD's voice roared in Issei's mind, stronger than ever. The unraveling was reversed. The world was not just saved. It was reborn. 1 month later, the balcony of the Occult Research Club building was quiet. But it was a comfortable, living quiet. The night was cool, the sky over Kuo town filled with stars. Rias and Sona stood side by side, leaning on the railing, looking out over the town they now protected. The world had changed. An official, unbreakable peace treaty now bound the three factions and the other pantheons who had witnessed the unraveling. The fear of the Silent One had been replaced by the quiet reverence for the Golden Guardian that now protected their reality. The Chaos Brigade had largely fractured, their philosophy of chaos seeming petty and childish in the face of true oblivion. Loki, his debt immeasurable, had become a staunch, if mischievous, ally to the New World Order. Rias and Sona were no longer just heiresses. They were leaders, their voices carrying immense weight in the councils of the underworld. They had stood at the edge of the apocalypse and had helped to weave their reality back together. "He's still there," Rias said softly, her gaze on the full moon. It seemed to shine with a slightly warmer, more golden light than she remembered. "I can feel him, not as a voice, just a warmth, a presence. He has become a fundamental part of our world," Sona agreed, her tone holding a note of scientific wonder and personal warmth. "Like gravity, or the flow of time. He is the guardian who ensures the sun will rise, the life force that Balin ces the silence at the end of all things." They were quiet for a moment, the comfortable silence of two people who had been through the impossible together and had come out the other side as something more than friends. They were sisters, forged in the heart of a dying universe. From the club room below, a sudden roar of laughter erupted. Issei had clearly told a bad joke, and Kaneko had likely delivered the deadpan punchline. Their friends were alive, happy, and loud. They were honoring his last wish. Rias smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. Sona's own lips curved in a rare, soft expression of contentment. Their grief had not vanished. It had transformed, maturing into a profound, motivating force. It was the foundation upon which they would build the future he had given them. The pact they had made, the contract that had brought him to their world, had been for a marriage of political convenience. But what had been forged instead was something far deeper. A family, bound not by vows or blood, but by a shared sacrifice and an eternal promise. They would live, they would lead, they would build a world so full of life, of chaos, of love and laughter and even of sorrow, that it would be a worthy tribute to the man who had become its silent, golden heart. The legend of the Maelstrom of Kuo was just beginning. Chapter 10 End.